Yay! Oh. Fixed the mics, didn't we? Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our chambers. I'm going to call our first public meeting to order for a land acknowledgement for Center Wellington. We are meeting on lands that have been home to Indigenous nations since time immemorial. We acknowledge we are on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, as well as the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee. With increasing encroachment by non-Indigenous settlers in the area now known as the Township of Center Wellington, the Mississaugas could not continue their traditional lifestyle and retreated to villages along the Credit River, eventually settling in the Grand River Valley. The Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation uphold their treaty rights within our jurisdiction. Today, the Township of Center Wellington remains home to Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We are grateful to have the opportunity to share and respect Mother Earth and are committed to building constructive and cooperative relationships with Indigenous nations. And now I'm going to ask if there's any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Okay, seeing none? Alrighty, so the purpose of the meeting. The purpose of this public meeting is to present and receive public input regarding a proposed zoning bylaw amendment, proposed draft plan of subdivision, and proposed draft plan of condominium on lands known municipally as 8243, 8268, 8282, Wellington Rd 19 in the Township of West Garafraxa. The purpose of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is to change the current zoning from A, agricultural, R1A 29.8 residential exception, R1A 30.2 residential exception, OSGC open space golf course, and EP environmental protection to R1A residential exception, OS open space golf course exception, and EP environmental protection. The effect of the amendment is to allow 118 single detached residential units on private communal water and sanitary service on the southeast portion of the land. The 18-hole golf course and associated facilities will remain on the northwest portion of the land. The applicant has also filed applications to the County of Wellington for approval, including a proposed draft plan of subdivision application 23T22001 and a proposed draft plan of condominium application 23CD22001. The intent of application for draft plan of subdivision is to create 2 blocks north and south of a bisecting road, Wellington Road number 19. Block 1 is located north of Wellington Road number 19, and Block 2 is located south of Wellington Road number 19. The intent of the application for draft plan of condominium is to establish common elements for the proposed development. The common elements to include roadways, servicing, etc., and 118 parcels of tideland, POTL, for the future single detached dwellings. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the Township of Center Wellington to the Ontario Land Tribunal, OLT, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of Center Wellington before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of Center Wellington before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal, the OLT, unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. If anyone wishes to be notified of the adoption of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, a written request must be filed with the municipal clerk, Township of Center Wellington, 1 McDonald Square, Elora, Ontario, N0B1S0. Any person or public body may appeal a decision of the County of Wellington not later than 20 days after the day that the given or written notice has been completed. If you wish to be notified of the decision of the Corporation of the County of Wellington in respect to the proposed draft plan of subdivision or proposed draft plan of condominium, you must make written requests to the Director of Planning and Development, Corporation of the County of Wellington, 74 Woolwich Street, Guelph, Ontario, N1H3T9. And at this time, I will ask our municipal clerk to advise how notice was given.
Notice was mailed to prescribed persons, agencies, and public bodies on or before April 6, 2023. A copy was also published in the Wellington Advertiser on March 30th, 2023. I can confirm the requirement for giving notice was completed on April 6, 2023.
Thank you. Now I will call on Cheryl Schindrick and Hugh Handy from Geranium Homes to provide an overview of our development. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of Council, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here this evening, and thank you for this opportunity to present our proposal. My name is Cheryl Schindrick, and I'm Executive Vice President of Geranium. Just going to make sure I have this organized the right way. Upside down? Okay, there we go. And I'm accompanied, as was noted, by Mr. Hugh Handy of the GSP Group, who are the consulting planners on the applications. And Mr. Handy, of course, is Vice President of his firm. I'm also accompanied by members of our team, our Geranium team, who are here with me this evening. Mr. Mario Giampetri, he is a principal of the firm, and Theo Manaharan and Bobby Wang are also here with me. Geranium was established in 1977, and we are a fully integrated land development and home building company. We're based in Markham, and this is our first opportunity to come and do some work in Wellington County and Centre Wellington. We have developed and planned master plan communities and infill developments around Southern Ontario over the last 40 years, and we're very proud to have received awards from our peers in the industry. As you can see there, we were Home Builder of the Year, we've won Sustainability Awards, and Community of the Year. So we take our work seriously and express a lot of pride in what we do. Also joining me this evening, I think I might have skipped over it, is our consulting team. Here we go. They are all noted on that slide, and they're here this evening to assist with any questions that may be, as may be necessary. Our technical material that has been filed with the county and the township has been prepared by this group of people. So a little bit of a chronology. The Fairview Golf Course, which has existed since 1977, was located on the southeast parcel. And in 1996, the former owners secured approvals for residential uses on that parcel to be developed in conjunction with the golf course that was there. Then in the year 2000, a new 18-hole golf course was constructed and opened on the northwest side of our northwest parcel. In 2010, these two golf courses were merged to form the Fergus Golf Club. And in 2022, February of 22, we filed applications for the two parcels that we're going to talk about tonight. We held an information meeting for the community at the Bellwood Hall last June, almost about a year ago. And of course, here we are today for the statutory public meeting. So the approval that was secured in 1996 from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, as I mentioned, added some residential uses to the southeast parcel, and they are outlined there in those red areas. There were 41 units in conjunction with the 9-hole golf course to be serviced on communal services. And then, of course, I noted that there was a golf course subsequently constructed on the northwest parcel. Our applications that were filed in February of 22 propose 118 dwellings on the southeast parcel with servicing facilities on the northwest parcel incorporated into the golf course lands. And taken together, the proposal maintains the principle of residential and recreational or golf course uses on communal services. We had filed an application to amend the county OP, but we also, subsequent to the filing of our applications, put a request to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing for modifications to the county OP that would reflect the amendment that we were seeking through the application to the county. It was based on the work that we had done, and that in fact has now, those modifications were made, and that approval is now in place through the county OP. So it recognizes residential on the southeast parcel. It notes that the number of homes is to be determined by way of a servicing report. And given the history of approvals on these lands, the requirement for minimum distance separation calculations has been removed. I would note that we did, notwithstanding that, we did conduct an MDS study, which is part of our submission. And the conclusion of that work was that given the uses that were permitted on the site, the MDS calculation was not required. As part also of the minister's approval, we were seeking mapping changes, and those are sort of summarized on this graphic. So on the left-hand side is what was in the Wellington County OP. I'm sorry that the scale is so difficult to read, and on the right-hand side is what how the minister modified the plan. So let me just say that you can see that the area in the center of the pink area on the right side is now larger. So there has been an increase in the core greenlands on the site today, which does form a very central portion and part of our site, which is a wetland and some areas to be naturalized. So we see that as a benefit, and again, it was based on our recent field work that confirmed the areas out there that had some natural heritage significance, and they've now been reflected in the county OP. So this little table is a summary of those approvals that were granted in 1996 and our proposal in 2022. So the difference in the number of dwellings is obvious from 41 to 118. The site area is larger because now the northwest parcel is part of the overall proposal. We will have now residential together with 18 holes instead of 9 holes back in 1996. The servicing strategy is still private communal services, and the tenure of the units is still condominium. And as I was just alluding to, the area of greenlands and core greenlands to be preserved on the southeast parcel has gone from just over 5 acres in the 96 scenario to over 16 acres, 16 and a half acres in our proposal today. I noted that we have members of our team here, and there is the list of the technical reports that were filed together with the application for the residential development. And I'm now going to turn it over to Hugh Handy.
Thank you, Cheryl. My name is Hugh Handy, and I'm a land use planner, professional land use planner, and vice president again at GSP Group. It's a pleasure to be here, Madam Chair, members of council, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce the application tonight in a little more detail. The proposed redevelopment, as Cheryl was mentioning, is 118 single detached dwellings on private services and private roads. The lots are roughly a half acre in size, ranging from about 21 meters to up to 55 meters, about 60 to 180 feet, and depths ranging from 45 to 65 meters, equates to 148 or 213 feet of depth. The overall development is centered around a wetland complex and an open space area. And the lots, as you recall from a previous slide, We're on both sides of that central core before, and that's really been increased as part of that central feature. And I'll get into some of the areas, but the idea is that it would wrap around that open space area and provide quite a unique part of the development. The water servicing strategy, there is a communal water treatment facility, including water storage to the north. That would be conveyed through a system to a treatment plant and then conveyed south to the southwest part or southeast parcel as part of the proposed development. There is quite a bit of technical information that I just want to highlight this evening. And so I'll go through this as, again, if there's questions, we can take those. But also in terms of the wastewater, it's a communal system that will be located on the north side of Wellington Road 19. Sanitary flows would be by gravity within the development, would then be to a pumping station down in the south side of the development. This would then be pumped back ultimately into irrigation, the golf course irrigation ponds, and they've been sized to include the capacity for large storm events. So that's in terms of the wastewater servicing. In terms of stormwater management, there is a pond that is located in the gray area in the southwest or the south portion of the site. The idea, again, that it will be conveyed to that pond. We would also look at low-impact development measures to be implemented to promote water balance and infiltration as part of that, and looking at environmentally sustainable measures. Water quality requirements will be achieved in that pond and also through any oil grit separators as part of it. Protection of water quality and quality is obviously paramount as part of that. We'll have a production well as well as 3 monitoring wells. Ultimately, the wells are in a deep aquifer as part of this. Sorry, I've jumped ahead. As part of this, and will be, there's no threats based on our analysis to any adjoining landowners or any existing development in the area, and that's been proven through our studies. We're also looking at sustainability measures for homeowners as part of this, gray water systems that will be offered as part of packages through the development. Geranium feels strongly about sustainability as part of this development, and obviously we're looking at that as a lot of part of future developments in general, and to reduce the water consumption as part of that. So I'll take us back a bit more to the development itself and the access points. One will be to Wellington Road 19, and that is to align with a new entrance to the golf course. So aligning those, which we think will be sort of a dramatic entrance to both the development and the golf course as part of that. There'll be 2 access points onto Third Line that will also come out and connect again to Wellington Road 19. The underground cart path, which if you've played the course, goes under Wellington Road 19, that will be maintained to provide that connection into the community as part of the overall golf course. Okay. Oh, I think we've really jumped ahead. I don't know. Access points. Might get back to the one I want?
Yes, there must be a big, large map on that.
There is, Actually, no.
No, it's small. It's a small one. do the finger puppets now? Or?
It's the trail in Central Wetland we're trying to get to.
Let me just see if I go back. Well, I can speak to it.
Okay. I'll hold it up for the audience. But you were able to get to this one.
Yeah, I was able to get to that one.
I think this one works for both slides.
Yeah.
I'll give you this one.
Okay, thank you. So as part of that, I'll pick up on the slide then. The central wetland feature is outlined in the green area, and it's part of the blue sort of area that's within the green circled. That's a wetland, and then there's open space area that will be part of it. The importance as well of a central trail system, and this central trail system follows part of the cart path right now, which was part of the golf course, or is part of the golf course right now. And then extending further to the south, the Elora Cataract Trailway is an important feature within, obviously, the county as part of the Trans-Canada Trail System. And our hope is through discussions with the neighboring landowners, we're almost there to connection, but not quite. So there needs to be further discussion with those adjoining property owners. We're also dealing with the black drain that comes down through this area, which is noted in blue, and that will remain as part of the rural drain system that comes from County Road 19, almost where the entrances will flow down through that. And again, all of this has been studied as part of the development. The environmental enhancement has been undertaken in natural heritage work by Beacon Environmental through full seasonal field investigations and ongoing monitoring. Concluded that there was a justification and conclusion to remove several small wetland features, and really those were the irrigation ponds, primarily the irrigation ponds and the wooded areas surrounding that. A lot of the trees, as we know in this area of the world, the green ash, are in poor health and will not survive. But the importance of this site, to the core features, were to be buffered and surrounding open space and enlarged and enhanced through some compensation for those removals, enhancement of that central wetland feature and area, including plantings along the Black Drain corridor, which I mentioned, naturalizing where possible through additional open water habitat, and areas of woodlot management to ensure that the trees that were there remain healthy and the additional trees are planted. In terms of the zoning, Cheryl indicated the official plan amendment, and like all planning instruments and tools, the intention is to then implement this in terms of zoning terms. So the residential areas would be reflecting the draft plan of condominium, but then obviously the protection of the open space and environmental areas, as mentioned in the notice, will be part of this. This will obviously be reviewed by your staff, and that as part of that, looking at the frontages to the lots, setbacks, height of buildings, minimum lot areas, to ensure that what is shown on the condominium plan is ultimately implemented for the development. We've created a draft plan of subdivision, so if you'll kind of imagine, we've laid down 2 blocks, which then a plan of condominium will go on top of that. So the 2 blocks, one is for the existing golf course on the north side, and one is for the residential area on the south. The draft plan of condominium then creates the lots within that block on the south side, and it would be a common element condo, which would have part of that private roads, services, open space, and trailways and walkways. So those would all be part of ultimately the condominium corporation that would maintain and be part of this golf course community. Ultimately, there is a policy context which we know is ever evolving. I think every evening, if I could be reading documents at the province, you all realize as a council the rate of speed that things are happening, kind of mind-bending. But ultimately, we're in a situation that we need to build homes faster in this province, and that is part of Bill 23. And so the supply of housing, whatever we can do within obviously sound technical and professional judgment, is part of this. And we believe that this development will be part of supplying that additional housing. As you'll go back to 96, there was the intention of a golf course community. We're really bringing this in to the current day as part of that, and not knowing at that point there'd be an 18-hole golf course. So this is all part of encouraging a development in an area that we feel is appropriate from a provincial policy to provide that range and mix of housing in a rural area, not necessarily in a serviced area, but as part of that, there are other opportunities within the growth plan to look at development. And ultimately, through OPA 119, that decision has in part been looked at, reviewed for the development. I think I'll pass it back to Cheryl for some closing. Thank you.
Thanks, Hugh. So, building on Hugh's comments about the provincial policy context or the policy context, certainly there is this evolving policy framework that is ever trying to increase the supply of housing and the speed at which we deliver housing. And you can pick up a newspaper any day and you hear about the need for housing, and it's all kinds of housing. I know affordability is a huge issue in many communities, and these will be homes that will be priced at a price point that perhaps would not be an affordable home, would not meet the definition of affordability, but there is a need for and a demand for every possible kind of housing, ownership and rental. Running in parallel with our Planning Act applications are 2 additional processes. One that is related to the black drain, which Hugh has alluded to, that traverses the site, and then a Class EA, just to confirm the water and wastewater servicing for the development. The black drain, I'm sure you're familiar with it because it covers a fairly large area within the township, and there it is. The catchment area is outlined in red, and our site is highlighted in yellow. And then here you can see a closer-up view of the site and the section of the black drain that is proposed to be abandoned. And the reason for that is because we have proposed a comprehensive stormwater management strategy for the development that will collect all stormwater on site and treat it in the stormwater management facility for quality and quantity, and it will release the water at a rate that matches the volumes and rate of flow into the black drain where it leaves the site. So it will have no impact on anybody downstream, and in fact, we're the upstream limit of the catchment area, so really it's all about the downstream impacts. And so because we'll be controlling everything on site with the storm pond, there will be no impact downstream. The Class EA has been initiated for the servicing strategy, and we have scheduled a public information center on June the 1st to lay out the options that were considered and the recommended strategy that we were talking about today. And so, of course, there will be some reporting that goes along with that, and a second public information center to be scheduled thereafter. So that concludes our formal presentation. And so the applications are to facilitate the creation of 118 residential units. Hugh has talked about how the applications are conform to applicable planning policies. The zoning bylaw amendment is intended to implement the development as proposed. And again, we believe this is in its own way contributing to the housing supply objectives of the province. And so with that, we are happy to respond to any questions.
That's great. Thank you for your presentation. We have registered delegations for this evening. So first I want to call on Bob Cameron as a resident. And for our delegations this evening, we're going to allow 10 minutes for speaking, and I will give you a 1-minute warning. Thank you. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you. Hopefully I'll be a lot less than 10 minutes. Well, thank you for allowing me to speak on this. My name is Bob Cameron, longtime resident, grew up in Center Wellington, and I happen to live right across the road from this proposed development at 6543 3rd Line. And of course, when I found out about this development, I had lots of questions, primarily about water quality, sanitary sewers, and density. And I took that opportunity to meet with Geranium Homes representatives over the last couple of years. And several times, every time I've met with them, I've found them to be incredibly open, making their time and availability, open-minded, engaging, and they answered all my questions. In addition to that, I visited some of their other developments across the province, and to get a first-hand look at their quality, not just quality of design, quality of materials, and overall feel of the developments and the communities they have built. And I can assure you, this is no cookie-cutter developer. They truly care about the communities they build, and when I went on tours, you could tell they were very proud, even after they were sold out. There was no reason for them to care. I wasn't buying anything, but they're very proud. So I support this development for a few reasons. One is, I think if we didn't build anything, everybody's heard of the term NIMBY, not in my backyard. Well, this is in my front yard, but if we don't support things just because it's a next door neighbor, we would never build anything. And I honestly believe this, a lot of the I's have been dotted and T's have been crossed by these folks. Second, they talked about supply and demand and the housing crisis that we're in. We've got probably 1,000 people a year wanting to move to Center Wellington, and we are not keeping up with the balance. Is this proposal going to do that? Absolutely not. These homes are going to be over $1 million or $2 million. But if you take 118 homes, there's going to be people in the community that want to trade up to an estate-style subdivision. Those homes are then going to be for sale. We've got a lot of work to do to build a broad range, and this is just one step. And third, I think I have seen firsthand. These people have answered all my questions. I've seen firsthand the quality that they've built and what Geranium Home stands for. You know, we've got some great builders in this community, some that have been around for years. Geranium Homes is going to be new to Center Wellington. That's why I wanted to check them out. And I will tell you that in my mind, they're very quality builders and quality people, and very high integrity people that I've met and got to know and appreciate over the last several years. So I think the only issue for me is let's approve this, let's get this going, and work with Geranium to make it the best possible development we can. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Okay, so we do not have any more registered delegations, so I'm going to put a call out to the room if there's anybody else in the room that would like to speak to this. Yes, would you like to come forward?
Hi, my name is Sean Geddes. I thought I was registered as a delegation, only because I thought if there was questions that I needed to register. That's, okay.
Is it on this one?
I don't have a presentation or anything. I do have some questions. I live right beside Bob, actually. Once we received the notification of this public meeting, it says, I've got it in front of me, it says the purpose of the public meeting is to present the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment and to receive public input prior to making a decision. So my understanding of the process was that this is at the county official plan level. The township is within the county, but doesn't have an OP for this area. I was of the understanding that the township might provide some input to the county, but ultimately the decision would lie with the county. And I'm hearing it was approved, but it was approved at the provincial level. And I'm just curious what the county's approval status is. Did council pass it? So that's a quick question. You don't have to answer it now, I guess, but.
Oh, sorry, we'll just have you complete your presentation and then we'll have
Okay.
Responses.
Okay, so that was
Yeah.
one of the questions. I'd like to know the status of that because there's a follow-up question to it. If, as I understand it, the province has approved this, it takes the county out of the process. I'd like clarification on that, actually. And therefore takes out any mechanism for appeal that would normally follow the council's decision. I looked at the Environmental Registry of Ontario, and on there, excuse me, there is no mechanism for appeal for this. So it's more of a process question rather than a technical question. So I'm just looking for clarification on those points. Thanks.
Alrighty, is there any other delegations that would like to speak to this? Oh, yes, would you like to come?
I would, if possible. I submitted a letter last week, but didn't get any response.
She can come and speak. Okay.
My name's Leanne Iravani, and I have lived at 6622 3rd Line at the end of the northeast parcel for 30 years. My letter went through 3 comments or 3 areas of concern. First of all, I'm totally opposed to agricultural lands being rezoned. Number 2, I'm concerned about the environment, not only mitigating wetlands, I'm concerned about the black drain. That's the first I've heard of that. As well as the increase in Greenland Cove. That's a new term that I have not been familiar with from the last meeting that this information was presented. And then the third concern that I have, which I listed in my letter, was regarding infrastructure. Housing, roads, traffic signs, lane changes, schooling, hospitals, all of the infrastructure that's required within our township to accommodate a quote 118 condominiums, which could conceivably have up to 4 people dwelling in each of those, and therefore cars. That is commonplace to see in some of the newer subdivisions within our community. So I'm not going to go into length with respect to each of them. My letter that was submitted through email to Carrie O'Kane, which was where I was directed to from my original letter of assessment or notice of public meeting, I followed that and submitted it there. But I, along with the 3 neighbors that are on the end of my road, have concerns of those 3 areas as well: agriculture, infrastructure, and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak as a delegation? Okay, seeing none, we're going to turn over to the applicants for any responses that you'd like to make to the delegations. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I know that Megan is here from Wellington County, and she may like to speak to the first question, but what I would offer is that the county continues to be involved as the approval authority for the subdivision, draft plan of subdivision and draft plan of condo. And what the minister, provincial approval has done is establish the principle of development. But the details around it are still within the purview of the county with the subdivision and condo applications, and of course the zoning at the township level. So I hope that that sheds a little extra light on that or provides some clarification. In terms of the second speaker, no lands are being rezoned from agricultural. There is no agricultural zoning on the property. At least there's no agricultural use on the property. So I hope that that provides some clarification. I'm not sure what the concern about the black drain is, but I'd be happy to speak with the speaker after the meeting, or and certainly find out what might be the concern there. There will be no impact on the black drain. It will continue to function as it's intended to do. The increase in Greenland Cove maybe was a misreading of the graphics, because I think it says Greenland Core. And so that is again intended to capture what's actually on the ground based on our updated field work. There has been a core Greenland area on the property, and our field work has shown that there is more there, and then we've captured that in the Wellington County OP. And again, with regard to infrastructure and traffic, I would be happy to speak to the speaker, perhaps one-on-one, and try and understand what the concerns are and answer those questions and when I understand what they are.
Great, thank you. Yep.
Hello, members of council. And so through you, the chair, my name is Megan Fergus. I'm the manager of planning and environment at the County of Wellington. So I just wanted to follow up on, I think Cheryl has done a good summary of where the official plan amendment does stand. But I think Mr. Getty's point was he wanted clarification about what his appeal rates are. So just to be clear, the province has made a decision on this county official plan amendment that's been made. So they've taken the decision away from the county. They've made the decision ultimately. And to be clear, Cheryl is correct as well. The applications that do remain with the county in its approval framework that exists is the subdivision and the condominium. And so when it comes to appeal rates, what essentially remains is in relation to the zoning bylaw amendment.
Great, thank you. Alrighty. Okay, so moving along, we'll have questions from council. So I'm going to ask an opportunity for all of our councillors to do any questions. So I would like to start with Councillor Craddock.
I have no questions right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilton.
Thank you, through you, Deputy Mayor Jefferson. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Schindrick and Mr. Handy. Appreciate all the additional details on the environmental protections and some of the enhancements you'll be taking. Oh, sorry, my mic. There we go. I'll speak closer to the microphone. Is that better? There we go. Is that better? Perfect. Thank you. So thank you for the presentation. And I just didn't hear too much about the neighborhood with the neighbor relationship with the farm that's there. There's an active dairy farm just south of the property. So I'd like to understand a little bit more about what kind of measures you'll be taking to minimize potential conflict with that dairy farm.
Thank you. Madam Chair, may I answer directly through you to Councillor Wilton? Thank you for that question, Councillor Wilton. We've had a number of discussions with the Bowman family, the owners of the dairy farm to the south. We've met with them and in person at their property, and we were treated to a tour of their operation, which we were very grateful for. And we have spoken with them again as recently as earlier this week. And our intention is to work with them on the interface between the development parcel and their parcel. We know through our discussions with them that encroachments is a big concern. And we have committed to installing fencing, which we will determine with them. They have talked about chain link fencing, which we are entirely supportive of. We also want to install evergreen trees along that boundary, so also to have a visual barrier between the residential and the agricultural operations. Those are some of the key pieces that we have talked to them about. Obviously, whatever we can do to be a good neighbor, we will undertake to do. And we have offered also to cover any costs that they may have, legal or otherwise professional, to assist with this process and the integration or the coming together of the two neighboring uses. There's a couple of parcels that we've talked about a land swap with them on either side of the Black Drain. And of course, we know the Black Drain continues to be important to them, so we will want to ensure that we don't do anything to interfere with its functioning.
Just a quick follow-up. Did you have any consideration to providing some letter of notice for people purchasing the homes that they are moving into an active agricultural area?
Thank you. Yes, we have also committed to including in all the agreements of purchase and sale a notice that there is an operating dairy farm operation next to their residential enclave.
Councillor Adams.
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Eboy.
Thank you, through you, Deputy Mayor Jefferson. I just have one question. Great presentation, but I didn't understand entirely when you spoke about abandoning a portion of the Black Drain and taking on that responsibility. I hear it. I'm trying to understand it all. My mind goes to what if something does go wrong in 2 years or 4 years, and you've created this new adapted system? Who's going to be responsible if there is a negative impact?
Well, so as I understand it, and perhaps I'll call on our stormwater expert to speak further to it, abandonment is such a harsh word, but we're basically going to replace the function of the Black Drain where it traverses our property with the stormwater facilities. So all the stormwater is being collected into the storm pond. It's obviously going to be built to provincial and township standards for both quality and quantity. And it will release the water on a controlled basis so that it's entering into the Black Drain as if there were no stormwater, as if there was nothing changed.
I respectfully, through you, Madam Deputy, I respectfully understand that portion. Okay. I'm not entirely clear on if something did go south, it's no longer ours. It's something that you've now adapted or changed or
Right,
modified.
right.
Who would be responsible?
So
is
there
really
would
my
be
question.
a responsibility agreement that the developer initially will enter into, and then ultimately the condo corporation for the maintenance and management of that facility. So the responsibility would lie there to ensure that it operates the way it's supposed to operate.
Thank
And
you.
I think, Mr. Rd, or did you want to add anything to that?
You summed it up very well.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is that everything, Councillor Evoy?
Thank you, yes.
Yep, okay. Mayor Waters?
Thank you. A few questions. I noticed there is a reduction in that, the wetland area. How many hectares are we looking at a reduction there?
It's actually,
Or that I'll call it wetland and woodlot complex?
yeah, it's actually going to get a little larger, Your Worship.
So is that-
Through you, Madam Chair.
So I just mean, I noticed that there was basically, in, I think it's Street F to Street D, there is, that's a grouping of trees all through there. It's a little forest, basically. And right now, it looks like it's slated for housing. And because the lots are, did you ever consider, because the lots are large, as we know, just intensifying and maybe in an area, certain lots, and being able to keep that woodlot complex as so complements the that wetland complex. It'll just, you know, in terms of its form and function, I think it would add to that whole complex. But and I know there was some question on some of the types of trees, but it still is a complex that's being utilized by, you know, critters, and it definitely has a function. But because of the lots being the size they are, you could intensify the development and still allow that complex to stay there and get your yield still. Had you considered that?
So let me, Your Worship, and through you, Madam Chair, call on our natural heritage expert to just shed some further light on, would you mind? Thank you, Carolyn.
No problem. Hi, I'm Carolyn Glass with Beacon Environmental. So there's a couple things. There is actually a wetland, and we staked all of this with the Conservation Authority. Two of them were the sort of irrigation ponds that were used by the golf course, so they meet criteria in terms of removal. Many of the trees that surround that swamp that's there, we are maintaining, and that's part of what makes that core area, and it's everything that's on the other side of the trail that's proposed in the existing golf course. And then there's a lot of other open spaces that we're maintaining.
Does that help you?
No,
You know it.
very
like the back of your
familiar.
hand.
Yeah. There's a lot of open spaces we are maintaining and trees that are being maintained. But you're right that there is a strip of trees that was originally contemplated as well in '96 for removal, and that is being removed at this point as well. None of them count as significant features, but there will be some tree removals that we'll have to.
But it's part of a larger complex. So.
They are separated by golf course through there. So there's a little bit towards the edges and fitting in the stormwater pond where it needed to be on the south side. But otherwise they are separated by golf course and heavily manicured right to the edges of them. And as we had talked about as well before, and Cheryl had brought up, our plan as well is for all the trees to remain, that we're going to do woodlot management and make sure that the ash that's dying out is replaced. At the moment, these woodlands are very heavily shrubbed. It's a funny way to put it, but just to make sure that they continue to be woodlots and continue to have that function. So,
But we could take a look at
absolutely.
your comments, Your Worship, and factor that in and have some further discussion.
Yeah,
about
and
that.
we also hadn't talked about yet of potential for other planting in other areas and other enhancements and that sort of thing as well, which is typically something we then go through.
Okay. Another question. The minister's order, I noticed that you have the latest and greatest, that little line work that we were all received, what was it, a week ago, whatever, Thursday night?
A week or two or something.
Yes. I noticed that it encompasses the entire property on there. As you know, those development lines are for potential for development. Obviously, there's a housing component that you're proposing on the south, and then on the north. That line, the development lines also, is that indicating maybe potential future development for housing? Or is that will always be kind of in golf course lands? Because as you know, we're all kind of trying to navigate this new world in terms of these lines.
Yeah.
And when I saw that line, it just kind of triggered a thought that way.
Yeah, so through you, Madam Chair, to your worship, the modifications occurred on the southeast parcel. So the northwest parcel is reflecting, what's there in the status quo.
Okay, so the intent is not to do the north part as housing potentially?
It was not part of the proposal.
Okay. And in the last, if I may, it's just on the MDS. As you can appreciate, this has gone from 41 to 118, and a kind of peculiar situation because it's not your typical development. Sort of it's in a rural context, and the estate homes. Back in the day, they were a lot more prevalent than they are now. The one thing I have, and Councillor Wilton alluded to, is the MDS, and I'm concerned. I grew up on a farm. We don't want to put people who have been in the community a long time in a situation where they can't continue to do what they want to do, or potentially increase the things that they want to do. So I know from your reports in the MDS, there was no issue on your consultants indicated there was no issue, but I just preface that I want you to continue that conversation with your neighbors to make sure that we're not impacting what they hope to do themselves, because in this community we want to be good neighbors, and we like to welcome new people into the community. We also want to protect the interest of our community here as well. So anyways, just
You have our commitment to do that.
Yeah. That's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Waters. Councillor McDonald, questions?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Jefferson. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is a golf course. Do we have direction arrows of balls that are a potential? I know there's trees around, but we can't always rely on them. I have experience with golf courses and living on them, and yeah, I was lucky. The balls all shot away from my backyard, but so that is yeah.
So, Madam Chair, through you to Councillor McDonald. So the golf activities on the southeast parcel will be removed. There will be no golf there in the developed state, and will be limited to the northwest, to the other side of the road. So hopefully the errant balls from the northwest side stay on the northwest side.
Depends on the golfer,
but I mean that course is functioning today as a golf course, and I'm not aware that there's any problem with errant balls onto the road.
And I have another question, Deputy Mayor. I always have that community safety hat on, and the traffic flow and the entrance. Have you done a traffic assessment? I think you've preliminarily done one. I just wondered if you've spoken with county as a possible roundabout or some type of traffic calming measure.
So through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor McDonald, we have done a traffic analysis, and we have, as part of that, we're proposing turning lanes on County Road 19. So we're going to line up the entrance to the residential with a new entrance to the golf course, which we intend to improve. And so the turning lanes will allow traffic that needs to turn either south or north to get out of the lane of travel. And that should certainly improve the safety of the area. And then, of course, there will be the turning movements at the third line, as happens today.
Okay. In a perfect world, I'd like to see lights or a roundabout, but thank you. Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
Through you, Chair. Sorry, just during the conversation, I just wanted to confirm when you talked about the woodlot management and the replacing of the ash trees. So there will be as many or more trees in the new development as there is currently?
The idea is to improve the function of the woodlots that are remaining. So at the moment, there's a lot of dead canopy. And the idea would be for the woodlot areas that are remaining within and around the swamp community that's being maintained, to have that function better as a woodland. So replacing individual ash trees and making sure that dead is cleared out and replanting within those areas, and then planting the buffers as well. So we've afforded buffers as opposed to the current golf course that runs up against these features, and a few additional open spaces that are throughout that area, and they would be planted as well with trees to sort of buffer and enhance that entire core section.
Councillor Wilton?
Thank you, through you, Deputy Mayor Jefferson. Just a couple of questions. I was wondering if when I look at the design brief, it looks like these houses are geared towards families because they're fairly large sizes. So I'm just curious if any of the parkland or any of the open space will be dedicated to parkland or play space or kind of community gathering types of environment, or how that will be designed. So that might be a question
We've
for
got
you.
an open space area, and we haven't gotten to that level of detail yet, but certainly the intention is that this would be very user-friendly for the ultimate residents. And so we would be working with staff on what the look of that would be, what the function of it would be. We like to put in these features at the beginning of the development process so that it's there for the first resident and their family.
And just another question. I, like Mr. Cameron, did my homework on geranium, and I saw that you have a big commitment to giving back to the communities you work within. So I was just curious if you can give some examples of how you might give back to a community you do work in and build your homes in. Thank you.
So in this instance, I know that the Elora Cataract Trail is a very significant amenity, and as we understand it, it is in need of some improvements. I mean, these kinds of amenities can always use some help, so we would love to talk to you more about that. There's some drainage issues on the third line, and we've had discussions with the residents there. Mr. Hughes is here tonight, and we've spoken with him. Our engineering team have come up with a way that we could mitigate the water that comes down third line and get it out to the ultimate destination of it sooner, so that the homes are not impacted the way they're being impacted today. So we're working that through with the Conservation Authority. A couple of examples. We've also had some great discussions with the Lions Club about the Bellwood Hall, and who I believe it's a municipal facility, right? But they use it, and so they've spoken to us, and we'd be happy to have some further discussions about that.
And Councillor Evoy?
Once again, through you, Madam Deputy, thank you. Just a thought, I did want to hear more about what the plans are around your greenery and what you're planning on adding there. And I wonder, humbly and respectfully, if it might be worthy of a conversation with another local group in our community that just the other day came to us asking if they could get more involved, and that's a group called Neighborwoods. I'm certainly not being prescriptive or directive, but potentially suggestive that you connect with them, because they are very aware of and committed to the well-being of the trees in our community. In addition, I love what you said about the trail work, and look forward to having a planned active transportation plan. Will there be room for bike lanes? Will there be connections to our existing trails? Love that you're planning on adapting or fixing them up, but to be able to access them would make great sense as well. So I look forward to seeing where some of those go.
Thank you, Councillor Evoy. Yeah, I would love to meet this group, Neighborwoods, and I forgot, I wanted to mention as well, Councillor Wilton, Dr. Thomas Nuds. Yeah, we'd really like to meet with him and get his input into the plan as well, and the natural heritage areas.
Alrighty, so I'll just ask if there's any further questions from council. Okay. We already did our call for delegations though earlier, so we're at the point now where we're doing the questions from council. We've already done the delegations. I would recommend, if you're wanting questions answered, you can talk directly to them after our public meeting. Thank you. Alrighty.
Hear from him, then they can.
Ron, was there anybody else down there that was missed by Devlin? Okay, so is there two delegations that are with, like, is there yourself and then somebody else that's there? Okay, hold on a sec. Okay, can I get consensus from council that this is okay? Okay, so we're going to be breaking from protocol right now. So Ron, if you'd like to come and speak, we are doing delegations are 10 minutes for speaking, and I'll give you a 1-minute warning. And then after you're done speaking, then we will give the applicant a chance to respond back to the outstanding delegations. If that's okay? Okay, you're welcome to come forward. And I'm going to ask you to say your name aloud for the record.
Thank you for pushing my button. My name is Ron Ashley, and I live on Rennie Boulevard, which is directly across the road from the most populated part of this subdivision. I have lived there for over 40 years now, and I'm not sure why my neighbor Bob Cameron is so for it when everybody who lives there that I know of is not for it. I would ask one thing for council members. If it was your well that was across the road from 118 homes going in that's going to draw water from the same bathtub, are you okay with that? I mean, it's okay for everybody that doesn't live near there, but it's not okay for people that live right near there. There's no park proposed. There's just the wetland area. 118 homes that are going to have multi-cars in the driveway. No park for kids. This lady told us at the last meeting in Bellwood last year that the properties were big enough for people to have their own play area for children. Now, I have more than a half-acre lot. This thing's in my way. I have more than a half-acre lot, not a lot more, 0.62 acres on my lot. And my kids half the time play on the street, Rennie Boulevard, which needs to be repaired because it's like a whoop section on a gravel road, and it's paved. That hasn't been touched in 50 years plus. My kids are out there. 3-year-old kids are out there. There's always kids on our little street. There's going to be 2 entrances off the third line, which is going to bring the majority of your traffic into that neighborhood down the third line. Again, where kids play, we have no sidewalks. This isn't Metro Toronto. This isn't Metro Newmarket or Markham. This is Fergus, and it's not even Fergus. It's in the middle of nowhere between Fergus and Bellwood, which is why I moved there with my parents when I was 9 years old. It has to go on the record that there's not enough schooling. I hear from my wife when she goes to John Black School, the school's full. There's French immersion kids being bussed all over town. There's kids coming from the north side of town to John Black filling it up. there's a lot of planning stuff outside of what they're doing that is not sufficient for what wants to happen on a golf course that's been a golf course almost as long as I've been alive. So council needs to think long and hard about something like this, because this isn't, it's got no services, there's no natural gas. We have high-speed internet stuff put in the ground, and whoever the contractor for that was has left our lawns torn up that we fixed ourselves. We don't have high-speed internet out there. We don't have any water services. We have well and septic, sorry. It's not an extension of Fergus. It's not town. It's not even Bellwood. Bellwood has much larger lots that has estate homes on it. This isn't a place to have estate homes and $2 million houses that are sucking the water from my bathtub. Thank you for your time, and sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. Okay. All right, would you like to come up and speak?
I would.
Okay.
So my name is Jim. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
My name is Jim McDonald. Same neighborhood, Rennie Boulevard. I've got a dug well, and I'm very concerned for the amount of the water that's going to be pushed down the black drain. I just want to make sure that over the course of the next few years as the houses get built, that the dug wells or wells around that area are going to be sustained. If we start running out of water, that we either get compensated for it, or at some point someone's going to be accountable. That'd be just my main concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Now, would you like a chance to respond? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of things I would like to respond to, because I want to assure you that we're not going to be able to interfere with the wells that are there. First of all, the test well that we've done for production purposes is a deep aquifer well. And Mr. McDonald has just said he's got a dug well, which is a shallow well, and we understand the wells in this area, in the Rennie Boulevard area, are shallow wells. But suffice it to say that if there was an impact, that we would be responsible for rectifying it. There is an open space block for parkland on our development, so I'm not sure. Perhaps it's not labeled park, and that's why it's confusing to Mr. Ashley. I'm not sure that the majority of the traffic is going to go down Third Line. Our reports do say that there will be a lot of, the main entrance will be off of 19. I acknowledge there will be more traffic on the Third Line, and however, with those two street connections, it does tend to have a bit of a traffic calming effect, but there will be more traffic, there's no question about that. And Mr. Rd, maybe you could come and elaborate on the black drain and the concern there, if that's okay, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Stephen Rhoda. I'm with R.J. Burnside & Associates, and we're the civil engineers on this project. We've done a lot of work and investigation into the black drain. I'll explain a little bit and answer a couple of the other questions that were asked earlier as well on a more technical basis. The abandonment of that portion of the drain, the function of everything between, and it's the wholly within this condominium development that the black drain is proposed to be abandoned. Everything southerly is going to remain exactly the same. All of the drainage functions that currently occur with the black drain are going to be maintained within the condominium, and as Cheryl had mentioned earlier, they have an obligation to maintain and control the drainage that goes through there. Any of the drainage on Third Line, there's some drainage on the easterly portion that is not connected to our development, but as mentioned, we're trying to look at solutions to the flooding there. On the west side toward the property, towards this development, we're going to make sure that all of that drainage is maintained, and the function of that, all the drainage and the black drain is maintained through the property and downstream. With the stormwater management we're proposing, we're maintaining the flows. Mostly, it's a little less than the pre-development flows, so we're going to hold and control the flows, clean it up, let it out a bit slowly over time, and so that the peak flows don't change in the black drain for those smaller flows. The larger storms, like the 1 in 100-year, 1 in 50-year storms, those ones we're actually reducing a little bit more. So some of those potential ugly big floods that might occur once every in a long period, we're actually going to be reducing those flows as well. So.
Okay. And do you have anything else to add, or you're okay?
I guess I would just say that I would, we're available to speak to the residents individually, one-on-one. We'll stay around outside the council chambers after the meeting and be available for anybody who wants to talk to us.
Okay, thanks. And then Councillor Evo, you have another question?
Gratefully, thank you so much through you, Madam Chair. I wonder if I might speak to the gentleman. I'm going to be really clear. I don't understand a lot of the peak flow, low flow. I would like it if you could make it really simple. The people who are desperately concerned about us taking water from their bathtub. Are these 118 houses going to be operating from the same source of water as the people? Like, they have their own wells. Can you just make it really simple for us so we can understand that they won't be fighting for the same drops?
I deal with surface waters, so rainfall
sorry,
events
wrong
and
person.
drainage.
I apologize.
You're talking groundwater,
There's
and I
the
know
gentleman
we
who's
have
gonna help
studied
us.
it.
Great,
and
thank you.
Here we go.
I feel like we could ease some minds if we're just really clear.
So, yep. Greg Patasenko from, I'm a hydrogeologist with WSP. So there's two different aquifers here. There's a shallow overburden aquifer that a lot of the wells around in that area around Bellwood Lake take their water from. And then there's a deeper bedrock aquifer which they're going to take from. So we have done, there was testing done on the proposed well there that will be used as the supply. It's on the northwest property. And the testing there showed, so when they pump it, there's no impacts to the shallow water levels. There's no change in water levels at all during the test. It was a 3-day test that was conducted there. In the deeper wells, there's monitoring wells that were installed around the edge of the property. The well there closest to the east, I guess, where there's some neighboring residents there, there was I believe it was about 2 meters of drawdown in that well. Now this is at a higher rate. The test was at 8.8 liters per second, and the requirement for this development is about 5 liters per second. So it'll be less, but 2 meters of drawdown is fairly insignificant when you're looking at a deep bedrock aquifer like this. So just for comparison, the well that we pumped, there was 11 meters of drawdown at the actual well. It gets less as you move away, obviously, and that represented about 36% of the available drawdown. So lots of available drawdown.
Thank you. Just follow through you, Madam Chair. So just to qualify then, they won't be, the people who have their own wells will still have their own wells. They're not accessing the same aquifer where the new well or water source will be coming for the 118 homes.
Correct.
Wonderful. Thank you for clarifying.
Follow-up question, Councillor McDonald.
To you, Deputy Mayor Jefferson, thank you for explaining that. If there was a fire, where are we getting the water from? We can't just rely on one pumper that we've just purchased. Oh, we have another guy. Okay.
Mateusz Lewandowski from TY Lynn, so we're taking care of the water treatment side of things. So as part of the water treatment plant, there's a series of calculations in accordance to the MECP guidelines. Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. So there will be water storage within the water treatment plant size to accommodate a certain fire flow for a certain duration based on the number of houses and stuff like that. And there'll be separate pumps as well in the facility to provide any kind of fire flows.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? We're good? All righty. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for following out protocol. So, all right. That's everything then. We're down. Okay. So with that, I want to thank everyone for attending, and I will advise that council will be considering the bylaw at a future council meeting. And that completes our public meeting, our first public meeting of the evening, and I will declare this meeting adjourned. We're going to do like a 5-minute recess so we can get reorganized and set up for our second meeting. Thank you. Alrighty, good evening and welcome back. Okay, so I'm going to call the first or second public meeting to order. Any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Councillor Welton.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Jefferson. I have a conflict on RZ 13/22, 223 St. Andrew Street East, Fergus. My spouse is a senior partner at MHBC Planning, and he is providing planning services for this application.
Okay, thank you. Alrighty. The purpose of this public meeting is to present and receive public input regarding a proposed zoning bylaw amendment on the subject land known as 223 St. Andrew Street East in Fergus. The purpose of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is to change the current zoning from C1 Central Business District Commercial to C1 Central Business District Commercial Exception. The effect of the amendment is to allow a 5-story, 15-meter building from ground floor commercial space and 4 stories of residential dwelling units above. The redevelopment will include the removal of the existing dwelling and accessory buildings. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of Centre Wellington before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Township of Centre Wellington to the Ontario Land Tribunal, the OLT. If a person or public body does not make oral submission at the public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of Centre Wellington before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body may not be added as the party to the hearing of an appeal before the OLT unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. If anyone wishes to be notified of the adoption of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, a written request must be filed with the Municipal Clerk, Township of Centre Wellington, 1 McDonald Square, Elora, Ontario, N0B1S0. At this time, I will ask our Municipal Clerk to advise on how notice was given.
Notice was mailed to prescribed persons, agencies, and public bodies on or before March 30th, 2023. A copy was also published in the Wellington Advertiser on March 30th, 2023. I can therefore confirm that the giving of notice was completed on March 30th, 2023.
Thank you. And then now I will ask Pierre Chauvin, and is it Gillian? Gillian? Okay, so we'll just have Pierre from MHBC Planning Consultants to provide an overview of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, it's Pierre Chauvin, and Jillian is not here. Dave Gillies, the applicant, my client, is here with me this evening, and also Dan Curry, who is our heritage expert in our firm, and probably in the back row, the architect with Friat Turner, who is also instrumental part of our team, Nicola Augustine, who's behind the design thinking behind this. I'm just the mouthpiece. I am a planner at MHBC Planning. We're a firm out of Kitchener. I do live in the area, as does Nicola and members of the Friat firm, as does Mr. Gillies. So we are a local firm, and with representatives living in the area. A lot of what I'm going to be speaking to is almost a repeat a little bit of what I presented last week. I'm not going to go over some of the issues we have in our community that affects all of us in Ontario in terms of providing for attainable housing and the housing crisis that we're in, and really the objective is for this development is not to solve that problem. We're just going to be a small part in helping to move forward and providing more attainable housing to our community, which is desperately needed. So I will see if I can move this forward here. Do I have to tell you when to move forward, like on a virtual meeting, or? No. Okay. So Before I begin, I'm going to ask my lovely assistant here to hand out some letters, and if I can approach, give it to the clerk, and the clerk can hand them out. And I'll come back to this submission at the end of my presentation, but if you can just hold on to that. This is just a slide illustrating where the property is. This is in Fergus, at the corner of, I'll call it the northeast corner of St. Andrew Street and Gowrie. There are two existing buildings on the property. They will, if this is approved, they will be removed and replaced with the proposed 5-story mixed-use building. This whole area is part of the central business district of Fergus. The lands along, not only within this on the subject property, but all the lands up to Cameron Street along St. Andrew, all part of the same zoning of the commercial one, C1, which is typically the downtown zone. So this is sort of within an area that's identified as the downtown, as well as the heritage area that's identified in your official plan, which is why we've completed a heritage impact assessment relative to this proposed development, which I'll speak to later. But again, we believe this location is well located relative to all the arterial roads, your provincial highways, your county roads, well served by a number of parks, our Canadian Heritage River, the Grand, a number of commercial uses within the downtown, restaurants, banks, libraries, etc. So very walkable, and much like the other two applications you heard last week, certainly within a walking distance of many amenities that the future tenants could enjoy once built. Here are some images, and I'll qualify the images again. Probably don't do the building justice in terms of the colors and the how it's projected on the screen. So the intention, the intention is really to show in these images sort of how the massing is placed on the property. But it is a 5-story building. It's a mixed-use building with commercial at grade, with residential uses above. As I mentioned earlier, it's within your central business district, which does have a height cap of 3 stories or 11 meters in height, which is what this application is about. What we are proposing is an amendment to your bylaw to permit 5 stories or up to 14.9 meters. So we're talking a difference of 3.9 meters difference from what is permitted. Ultimately, what this is going to do, in addition to providing and expanding some of the retail uses within your CBD, is providing increased housing stock in the form of rental units. This will be purpose-built rental units that allows for, again, right downtown, to allow for people to live and work and play within walking distance in this community. This development will be served by an elevator, so they'll be fully accessible, and which is desperately needed. There are very few opportunities like this within our community that have rental units that have an elevator. Here's an image of the site plan. Just to get oriented, St. Andrew is the road at the bottom of the image. Gowrie would be on my left. There is surface parking at the top of the image in that light gray with the green landscaping around it. The building itself is in the darker gray at the bottom of the image. So there is, as I said, we're proposing an amendment to the bylaw for the increased height. There will be 2 units on the ground floor for commercial units. There'll be 17 residential units in total. Quite a variety of sizes as well. So 6 one-bedroom units. Some of those are one, and a couple of them are 1+ den. So ranging about 750 square feet. And you have a number of 8 2-bedroom units and 1 3-bedroom unit. The 3-bedroom is a very good size of 1,400 square feet. So a nice variety and mix that allows for a variety and tenancy within the building. We are providing for 14 on-site parking spaces. This application, as I mentioned before, is similar to the other two applications you heard last week, does not require an amendment to the parking because it is within the C1 zone, which permits a 50% reduction in parking. Having said that, so we are providing 14. We also will be providing an additional 9 spaces. Mr. Gillies owns the land across the street at the corner of St. Patrick and Gowrie, and has 9 spaces available in that parking lot that he owns to provide for additional parking space. So in fact, the total parking that we will be providing is 23 spaces for the 17 residential units. So definitely ample parking provided for the tenants and the commercial uses. And to hopefully satisfy Councillor McDonald, we are providing lots of indoor bicycle storage, as well as indoor lockers and storage within the basement. So each unit will have their own personal locker for storage. These next couple slides are just, again, sort of the architectural elevations with the colors. Again, the colors don't do this image on the screen isn't quite reflective of the actual colors and materials, but it is meant to be all stone and brick, a mixture of stone. There'll be no vinyl on this, with some glass. You can see on the left image is the front facade looking from St. Andrew Street with the balconies at the upper levels. The lower levels, it's just covered by an archway or a portico, which is protected from the elements. So all the entrances to the commercial. There is actually a unit on the ground floor on sort of that right-hand image under the darker side. There's a residential unit. I think that is a 3-bedroom unit there. So again, they're all covered entrances, and the main entrance to the apartment is there's also an entrance from this side as well as the parking side. The image on the right is a view looking from Gowrie. So again, you can see that arched portico at the bottom, at the base of the building. And if you ever go for a drive, you'll see the same sort of pattern of arches in the mental health building just behind us on St. Patrick. So there is some reflection of some of the design elements that are already in the community. So again, you can see a lot of the fenestration on the buildings. There is a stepping you'll see on this elevation. The top 4th and 5th stories on the St. Andrews facade step back from the corner, and you can see that's where the balconies are sitting. And then the other elevations, we have the view from the parking lot, and again, all the balconies are either facing St. Andrew or the parking lot, not towards the residential area. I'll call it to the east, or the sort of where some of the low-rise residential uses are. And then this is the view from the low-rise residential area. On the right-hand image, you can see again, the balconies are facing. We are considering putting screens on that, but again, we are not at that stage. These are just preliminary designs. The next stage to this will be a site plan approval process where we will get into the design elements with staff in terms of lighting, landscaping, and all those details. This is still very preliminary to help you give a sense of what we're proposing at this stage. As I mentioned, we are within the heritage area of the Fergus CBD and within the Fergus Village heritage landscape. And as a result, we've prepared a heritage impact assessment, which my partner Dan Curry authored. There are a number of listed properties. You can see on this image the pink dots on that figure represent which properties are listed. They're not designated, they're just listed on the Heritage Register. And in terms of the conclusions of that report, the report concludes that it doesn't anticipate any impacts on the surrounding resources. However, it did recommend some things to do in terms of protecting some of those resources. For example, completing a vibration monitoring plan that's done during construction to mitigate against any disturbances to some of the heritage resources that are abutting the property. With respect to the Fergus Village CHL, again, they concluded there's no impact on the heritage attributes of the CHL, and including significant views, and I have a few slides with respect to that. And as I mentioned, we'll try to use some of the similar design elements that are within the downtown in terms of material, stonework, and those types of things to try to design a very sympathetic and compatible building to the surrounding area. One of the aspects of the CHL mentioned views, and in particular the view from Tower Street to down St. Andrew. So this is standing in the middle of the intersection of Tower and St. Andrew. That tall gray building is the post office. The TD Bank would be on your right-hand side. So you can see down the road, and then I tried to circle this because it's very difficult to see the actual proposed building to scale relative to this view. And it really, in fact, these aren't my words, just speaking to somebody before the meeting, they said, wow, that's interesting, it's actually lower than the buildings that are on St. Andrew. Exactly the point. So that is, but we said, okay, let's look at this a little closer. This is what the view would look like if you're out from St. David and St. Andrew. Again, it's you can see it in the background next to the building at Gallery, and again, so this is just another perspective. And I should say that this heritage impact assessment is being peer reviewed by the township has retained, and we're still working with them on responding to some of the comments that we've received. And in fact, some of these renderings I don't think township staff have even seen yet, so this is all new to Mariana. These are also renderings that we've taken of views of the building from different perspectives. So these next view images, again, don't take the colors and materials that appear to be all just white or gray, tones of gray as the final product. This is still a work in progress, but this is just to illustrate the perspective and view and mass that it has along St. Andrew, with the, I'll call it the cottage next door. There's a nice tree line between our property lines which will be maintained. We have prepared a tree management plan as part of our application, and all those trees along the tree line will be maintained and protected, and it'll actually add as a nice visual screen. This also gives a nice advantage of that stepping I was referring to on those upper stories. Different perspective, looking more from the intersection of Gallery, and also creating a nice prominent feature at the intersection with a nice base to the building, with the portico and the arch portico, and then sort of distinguishing the different sort of levels with materials and articulation. So lots of time spent on trying to detail the design on this, but again, these will be vetted with staff at a later stage. This is a view looking down Gallery from the rear parking lot. And then, whoops, a little too far. So as part of our application, we have prepared an urban design brief to address the township's urban design guidelines. And not going to read all of this, but again, I'm just repeating what I've already said, that we're going to use a lot of natural stone and try to use more neutral palettes that is consistent with the surrounding area, and utilizing different design techniques to help reduce the mass of the building in terms of the stepping, the change in materials, those types of things. And also creating a nice active ground pedestrian realm, which doesn't exist today. One of the things that we've done to assess the level of impact in terms of compatibility, and these are just planning tools, they're not cast in stone, but what often is used is a shadow analysis where we look at, and this is typically used for really tall buildings, but appreciating that this is tall for Center Wellington standards, we want to assess what that looked like. And this is there are typically 4 time periods: the spring, summer, fall, and winter. We don't often look at the winter time frame because most people are indoors at that time frame. It's really about trying to assess the impact on sort of the amenity space or your private amenity space on neighboring properties, the streetscape, and in this case, the heritage buildings, whether we're casting too much shadow on those heritage attributes. And so the spring and the fall, it's generally the same. The sun is generally about the same area in the sky, and what this image shows, there are different time periods. So the really top image left is 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 2 to the far right on the top image, and then down at the bottom left is 4 o'clock, and then finally 6 o'clock when the sun is setting. And we've tried to superimpose two different shadows on here, and hopefully you can see this, but the blue outline represents sort of what you would get as of right with a 3-story building. And the difference, the darker gray, represents the difference from going to the additional 2 stories that we're proposing. And so you can see as you move through the time periods, and in fact, as you get to 12 o'clock, the difference is very nominal, I would suggest. As you get into the later evenings, certainly the shadow is cast further away. But again, the sun is moving, as you can see, and the shadow is not staying and creating a shadow for more than 2 time periods during the day. That's usually the test. It varies depending on municipality. You try not to cast shadows in an area for more than 4 consecutive hours, or 5, or 2 time periods in a row. And you can see in that case where, and even on a neighboring property, the rear yard is not in shadow all the time. And this is absent vegetation too. So we factor in the vegetation in there, and which is not being removed, it's there today. This is really not changing anything in great extent. This is the impact in the summer. So again, the same order of the images. So the sun is a lot higher in the sky, and so again, the difference between the as of right 3-story and the proposed 5, you can barely see on the image the difference. It's very close. So again, so whether we built something that is permitted as of right today, or what we're proposing in my submission, it's a very marginal difference. Another element that we look at in terms of compatibility, in terms of built form and scale, and in terms of the massing that we have, is we look at what is called an angular plane, and that's really a 45-degree sort of light our view from across the street. And it really intended to, something that intersects that plane would suggest that you probably should step that building back, or try, it has an element or an impact on the mass and feel of the pedestrian realm and comfort along the street. So you can see in this case, we totally comply with that 45-degree angular plane. These aren't requirements, again. We're just utilizing these as sort of guidelines for us to demonstrate to you that the heights that are being proposed are not incompatible from sort of a pedestrian standpoint or a design perspective. And it doesn't create an adverse impact, particularly on our neighbors from a shadow perspective. So again, this is in our planning report, not intending to read this, but we certainly believe it meets all the tests with respect to provincial policy. At the end of the day, this is bringing more affordable, attainable housing to the market. And really that's what we need. And it takes all kinds. You saw last week we had some that were really small. This week these are larger units, and we need all kinds of units, whether they're single detached homes, townhouses, apartments, rentals, or condos, in order to attack and tackle this housing crisis we're in. We need all kinds of housing. Rental for sure. And I'll leave this with you, and that's what this package is with you tonight, are comments and letters from tenants, largely tenants from Mr. Gillies' existing buildings in Fergus or elsewhere. And they provide a very, I'll encourage you to read them at your leisure this tonight or over the weekend. They provide an interesting perspective that we're not hearing. And quite often in these discussions about new development, the voice that we don't hear is the voice of the future people that will be living here. And in my view, this is the voice. And when you read these, you're hearing stories from people from all different backgrounds, all different life circumstances, and these are real people. There was a suggestion at the last meeting that, you know, these are people living here that are on minimum wage, or they're young and they can't possibly afford this. This is not what we're talking about. We have people, yes, there are people like that, but there are people in all manners and form out there looking for housing desperately, and they just want to live in our community. And that's what this is about, is building a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. Okay, so moving along, we do have registered delegations for this evening. So I'm going to call on Bruce Lloyd, partner Stone Gable Incorporated. And for our delegations, again, I'll just make note that we are doing 10 minutes to speak, and I will give a 1-minute warning. Thank you. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, I'd like to ask for your indulgence. Due to surgery, I'm not doing very well with the English language currently. Before I start, I could probably write a letter there too. I've worked with the proponent, and let me start. Good evening, Madam Chair, Your Worship, Mayor, members of Council. As property owners across the road from the proposed 5-story structure, we are opposed to the current proposal for 17 apartments and 2 commercial spaces. Our building, Stone Gable Inc., was purchased by us 15 years ago, and our property has 50 parking spaces for our tenants, staff, and their customers. When we applied for a building permit to add 1,600 square feet to a second floor, we were initially denied because we didn't have enough parking. Commercial and residential parking allotment varies, and there is no consideration for the 2 new commercial spaces proposed. What type of commercial and what requirements are there when the 2 spots are allocated for them? Do they have staff? And if so, how many? Excuse me. This current proposal, while I understand meets all the criteria except for height, I'm challenging it only because of parking. Having changed and now securing parking across the road, because in the initial plan, an extra 9 spaces were not there. There is still an issue of math. The lot in question has 40 parking spaces, am I correct? Is that correct, 40?
I don't know what else offhand.
40 parking spaces that we're delighted to have had because of the addition on St. Patrick Street, where zoning is different. With approximately 20 spaces already allocated to those tenants, add in 9 for the new development, that leaves 11 spots for the commercial use. 1 being a dentist's office with a staff of 6 and a license bureau with a staff of 3. That leaves 2 potential parking spots on the assumption current and proposed tenants only have 1 vehicle. As a matter of course, the first tenant had 3 vehicles when they moved into St. Patrick Street. History has shown there is more than 1 client per hour at either of the existing commercial spaces. We are not opposed to the property being developed. However, the burden of monitoring our parking lot should not be a decision council forces us to do should this proposal proceed as presented. Yesterday, I monitored our lot, and for an hour, 15 vehicles used our lot and headed north to commercial spaces on St. Patrick Street. We also have concerns that through the construction, our lot will become a staging area for material drop-offs, turnarounds, and trades. This development will take months to complete, and the extra Work involved on our part increases as we try to maintain our tenants' ability to use the lot they pay for. Working in the industry, I am aware of the economy of scale on the developer's part. I also understand that the trades are going to look for the best place to park when they get there early in the morning. And sarcastically, how conveniently for us to have that spot open. We have demonstrated that we can work with the developer, as an error was made on a previous build that was rectified by mutual agreement, saving the developer thousands of dollars. Currently in our area, there is a restaurant for 40 patrons and 2 parking spots, a bakery with 1 parking spot, a Stan Mikita's with a dining room, a bank with no staff parking, and multiple commercial entities with no parking. On many occasions over the years, trying to maintain the inventory of parking, we have been told many times, there is nowhere else to park. I'm only going to be 10 minutes, or on many occasions, other forms of expletives. With heritage-listed properties on all sides of the proposed development, 5 stories just does not fit in with the character of the area. Exterior finishes proposed do work. 5 floors do not. In trying to sell this vision to council, all the buzzwords are in the proposal. An amenity added is an elevator for senior and accessibility. It is not an amenity, it is a requirement by law in the building code. The renderings in the proposal show views using a flat grade view to demonstrate height and shadows to existing buildings. The grade changes in the proposed development will tower over surrounding 1- and 2-story buildings adjacent. Excuse me, the statement of walkable community. I challenge you to walk from that particular place to the nearest grocery store and then walk back with your groceries for a week. Won't need to worry about it, I'll have a bicycle. This is not a NIMBY issue. It is a request of council to hear the concerns of current landowners. Your decision will, of course, be difficult, weighing the pros and cons of development. You are aware with any decision you make as a council, you cannot and will not make everybody happy, no matter how you decide to move forward on this proposal. All of us need to enjoy our respective properties and work together for the greater good of the community. I applaud the developer for trying to add inventory to a scarce market. However, let's place them in the proper setting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, our second delegation is a Sean Munier. Munier? Thank you. Great, thank you and welcome.
Hi. Council, chamber, friends and family, neighbors in town. My name's Sean Munier. I'm a local resident of Fergus. I live in Fergus Fine Foods, not actually in Fergus Fine Foods, but above in the same building as Fergus Fine Foods. I did have a script to read, but I'm not going to read it because I think I will be more engaging if I look at you and speak to everybody here. My wife and I live in this unit, have lived there now for 7 years, and it's awesome. We lived there, well, we lived in Toronto for 20 years. My wife was raised in Fergus, and we decided to move home, essentially. And I am ultimately the target market of this development that's being proposed, and I'm completely against it for a number of reasons. 3 main reasons, actually. But before I give you my reasons, I want it to be very clear that I'm not opposed to building in town. I love this town, and I want more people to live here. I just think we need to be careful with how tall we build in town. how much parking we provide the tenants and the people that live and work there to access, and the building materials that have been proposed are also a heritage assessment issue. So those are the three big ones for me. I'll start with the first, meaning the height. I did go to bylaw school at Humber College and graduated with honors. And part of the reason why I wrote a script was so I wouldn't get emotional, but I'm going to just try to keep it cool here. 5 stories well, 3 stories is what's allowed downtown. And there's a reason for this bylaw. You know, bylaws are intentionally designed to protect the health and safety of our residents. A building of 5 stories, 1 commercial floor and then 4 residential, will inevitably produce far more people and far more height and shadow, as those flat drawings we saw were really, really difficult to read. Even if I was sitting back there, I couldn't really see. The 5-story building also comes up right up to the sidewalk. If you look at the plans, I'm concerned about a number of things, predominantly ice falling in the wintertime. There's no real egress or area outside, so which could lead to a property standards issue. The parking that's been provided, or apparently provided, it's around 12 spaces ultimately. I think the developer is saying that there's 23 or 24 spaces. He's now added the 9 or whatever across the street, which if you just walk by there any given day, Monday to Friday, you can clearly see that that lot already is jammed with people parking their vehicles there. The streets are lined with vehicles. I love Fergus. I live in Fergus, and when Miriam moved in, we welcomed her with open arms because the gym that was there before was a bit of a nuisance, banging on the dropping the weights and banging our walls. Now the worst thing I deal with is the smell of butter tarts. And if I walk out my front door right now, I have at least 4 or 5 vehicles, some of whom are up into my, onto the property, which isn't even a parking space, because there's nowhere to park. The parking lot that we use behind our building, just to clarify, my address is 250 St. Andrew Street East. And if you're familiar with Fergus, it's the big white concrete building that used to be Grand River Pottery, which now homes the beautiful Fergus business, which we all love. She has 2 commercial vehicles that park in front of our unit. And then there's about 3 or 4 parking spaces that were formed out in that area as well. That whole corner at any given point during Monday to Friday is rammed with parking. There's no place for us to sit or park. Half the time when I come home from getting groceries, I can't even get in my driveway because of the lack of parking that's available. So although I'm not supposed to be talking about parking, we're talking about a bylaw amendment, this is a direct result of having not enough parking. This will be an impact on everyone in that area. I have a beautiful neighbor across the street, Jeff and Judy, who have a beautiful little granddaughter, and they play outside in the garden. And I know as soon as that building hits 5 stories, they're gonna be playing in the dark. So please consider that the height being an issue for a number of reasons. Population density. Parking spaces are number 2. Parking, again, what I said was in my area, in front of my building, there's very little parking. And I just went for a walk with my little puppy today, and every single place along the trail of this build is already dominated by someone either parking there or you can't park there. I have photos in my iPhone that I could share with you all right now of people parking in my driveway, putting their hazards on, people parking in my neighbor's driveway. There just isn't enough to accommodate the size of this build. If we can make it 3 stories, awesome. It'll fit the resident size of whatever else is downtown right now. So height, parking, and the final thing I really want to stress is the building materials. A developer mentioned that he's putting in stone. Well, I don't know if concrete and stucco are the property standards for heritage. I know that the impact assessment has already said and made mention that they should be using random cut stone, flat cut stone, so that it can blend with the aesthetic of the heritage aesthetic of downtown Fergus. This is a town that we're different from Elora. We're like the small Ontario, less touristy version, and people are coming. We had that article that got up in the newspaper recently, celebrating how cool of an Ontario town we have, and that's what makes us distinct. And I really want to help maintain that and not, encourage these big builders to come in right now. I know and I understand we're in a housing crisis, and I know that's a hot button to launch at us off the get-go, but this is not the way to do it. There are lots of other places in town where we can accommodate a build like this size. I really, really, really stress that we try to keep this build 3 stories with the appropriate amount of parking and use the right building materials that the Heritage Committee approves. Now, the parking spaces, just to go back on that quickly, I think he said there was 23, there's 11. You're also supposed to have, I think 10% of your parking lot should be for accessibility. And right now, I think there's only plans for 1 parking space. 10% you're supposed to round up. So in theory, he should, or they should have at least 2 accessible parking spaces in that lot. And then if you have to omit the 9 that he apparently has added. That does not exist. That's a fluff thing that he's added here. There is literally 11 maybe spots to accommodate, 14 units plus the commercial downstairs. It's going to be a nightmare. Sorry if I got a little heated. Thanks for listening. Please do not pass the bylaw amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next delegation is Gary Bryant. Welcome.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Gary Bryant, and thank you for having me, Mayor Waters, and Assistant Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council, and guests, friends, relations, and others. I've already submitted a written document on the Elora proposal, so I probably won't. I will try and restrain myself from getting into that. I want to talk about the importance of tourism in Centre Wellington, and with a particular emphasis on the value and significance of our downtown areas. Now, tourism, as we know, is really a very important industry in Centre Wellington, with lots of employment, and one that virtually every level of government supports, including the province of Ontario. The township of Centre Wellington certainly supports tourism, not just by maintaining a tourism information centre, but by sponsoring and promoting historical walking tours of both Elora and Fergus, and trying to maintain a balance so that neither community seems to get the better of the other in that respect. We've had 1 walking tour so far this year, sponsored by Elora Fergus Tourism, and that one was on April the 2nd. 50 people showed up, which was somewhat toward our larger number of walkers, consisting in the usual proportion of about half people from afar outside Centre Wellington and about half residents of Centre Wellington, including many new residents of Centre Wellington. I want to just jump to our official plan because I took the time to wade through it. And does it call for varied and affordable housing? Absolutely, definitely, no doubt about that. Does it talk about intensification and using partly used or disused space in our community? Absolutely, once again. No question of that. It also refers to the provision to add mixed-use buildings. Well, of course, we've been doing that for a long time, even as far back as the beginnings of Elora and Fergus. Mixed-use buildings with commercial on the ground floor and living space above. It's been with us for a long time, so very few of us, I think, are going to debate that. The official plan, however, does state things such as, we are a picturesque community where built heritage is preserved and accentuated. There's a good word, accentuated. I like that one. New development should be compatible with existing uses, small town scale and character. I know that quote has been referred to before. And under tourism, the township will protect and enhance the downtown areas. That same phrase is used again with reference to historic buildings and landmarks. Protect and enhance. I was thinking, what is the opposite of enhance? Well, it's probably make lesser, devalue, make appear less important. Anyway, we don't want to do that. And I think what does reduce our existing heritage in our in our communities, or what could, is the construction of buildings that don't seem to fit, that are either too bulky or too high, or both bulky and high, which detracts attention from our existing structures that we prize so much. Our downtown areas are really very small relative to urban areas nearby, so I think we have to work with greater vigilance in order to protect these. Now, just as our grand river system and our trail system connect the people of Centre Wellington, so our heritage and our shared history with its various events and peculiar characters, many of whom were inventive and creative, along with their homes, their workplaces. All of these things are important to the to our human landscape. I was trying to think of someone that might be a connector, because there are lots of linkages and connectors within our community, past and present, and so I was racking my brain to think of who might be a good person to select as someone that's got not only in the past context with other people and places, but has an influence today and perhaps even in the future. And I came up with the name of Hugh Templin. Now, most of us are familiar with the name Templin because, of course, of the Templin Gardens that were grandiose in the late 1920s and the 1930s, as developed by Hugh Templin's parents, Annie and John Charles Templin. Annie Templin was, in fact, a great-granddaughter of Hugh Black, one of the pioneer founders of Fergus, who had a tavern, one of the first important commercial buildings in Fergus, right across from where Melville Church now stands. Of course, it wasn't there at the time of the church, otherwise that might have created an interesting scenario, but it was taken down and rebuilt, and so a number of things have gone in on that site. Hugh Templin was a good friend of John Connon in Elora, and both, of course, end up producing significant writings on the history of the area. Templin's Fergus, The Story of a Little Town, came out in 1933 as a centennial work celebrating Fergus's past. And both Templin and his father were involved in running the Fergus News Express for many years in a former pickled egg factory, which was on the south side of St. Andrew Street, not far east of the present-day Grand Theatre. Well, Hugh's grandfather, in fact, had the Templin Works, which was a carriage and wagon works, located where the Lloyd's business currently is. I don't mean Lloyd's of London, I mean Lloyd's of Fergus. And this is, of course, one of the designated heritage structures that is among the four currently surrounding the proposed development. Hugh Templin was a dynamo in the conservation movement, and he helped as
That's 1 minute.
Thank you. He helped as a conservation pioneer to change the Grand River from a stinking cesspool in summer and a flood-carrying torrent in the spring to through the Shan Dam multi-purpose development to protect the downstream areas of the urban centers. All right, let's see. His influence even carried as far south as Elora, and Catherine Marsden in Elora took it upon herself to crusade later for the creation of a park south of the Elora Falls, and so that was successful. That effort was very successful, and in 1954, July the 20th to be precise, the Grand River Conservation Area Park opened, and as far as I know, and I think this still holds today, that this park is probably the busiest and the most profitable park from all of those in the watershed of the Grand River.
That's 10 minutes.
All right. Hugh Templin's latest book, The Precious Seed, which came out in 2012, long after he died. His grandchildren have actually carried on the legacy of Hugh Templin and the legacy of Fergus. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, and our next delegation, Sonia Day.
Hello, everyone. I'm not sure of the protocol of introducing myself. I'll just say that I live on St. Andrew Street in Fergus. I moved here. I lived in the country in Bellwood for 20 years. I moved here because I found it was a very walkable town to live in. And I've been here now for 5 years, almost, and I'm afraid it is changing, and not in a good way, because I don't know if any of the people who are involved in wanting to ram in this big building on St. Andrew ever walk around there. And the points that were made by Sean Meunier are absolutely right. The place is jammed all the time with cars. It's not a pleasant place to walk anymore. In fact, it's downright dangerous trying to cross St. Andrew Street. And I tried a couple of years ago to get a petition going, which I presented to the council, to have stop signs or at least reduce the speed limit on St. Andrew Street. I didn't get anywhere with it. No one was interested. But that's beside the point. I don't want to ramble on about that because it's not a separate issue. But there are a couple of points I want to make about this particular building. I read the whole plan, and they mentioned in it that everyone was going to, sorry, I've lost my notes here. The proposed development will make use of and support existing transportation networks. Well, what are those? That's what I would like to know. There aren't any. And there is this fanciful idea that people are all just going to live in this building and there are only 12 parking spaces, so people aren't going to need cars, they're going to walk everywhere. They aren't. Everybody who, even a one-bedroom apartment, usually there are two people in it, there's often a man and a woman, they're both working, they both have cars, they are not always working in Fergus, and they're not able to walk to where they work anyway. They all have cars. And that is the principal objection I think that we all have to this, is that there's not enough parking now, and for heaven's sake, what on earth is it going to be like with this 5-story building? Another point I want to make, which just occurred to me while we were watching this presentation, well, the architectural renderings that were made do not look like anything remotely like the town that I live in. The drawing showed what looked like a 6-lane highway. The gentleman made the point that this building would not tower over any other buildings in Fergus. That is incorrect. It's going to be taller than anything apart from that nice old bank buildings that is on the corner of St. Andrew and St. David. He also made this point about bike storage, and yes, so everyone's going to be able to put their bike in this building. Well, that sounds lovely, but the point is now people ride their bikes on the sidewalk all the time where I walk, because there is no space and it's too dangerous for them to go along the street because there are so many cars. And then the commercial properties are presumably in this building going to have visitors. And where are those people going to park? If we're getting emotional about this, it's not surprising. And the comment that this gentleman also made about real people. Well, I'm a real person too. I pay taxes, I live here, I love this town. I don't want to see it destroyed. It has this unique quality, and the point that was made that the 3-story limit was put in for a reason. This building will tower over everything else, and it will go right up to the sidewalk. There's talk about landscaping. Well, I'd like to know where this landscaping is going to be. At the back? Because that's where all the parking's going to be taken up. And the gentleman said that there were going to be 17 parking spaces. Well, I read this whole proposal, and there only seemed to be 12, but there were residential units. So 12 units with 2 people in them and 2 cars. And do the math. Where are all these cars going to go? And that's the point I want to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next delegation, Rosalind Sutherland. Welcome. Hi.
I just have a few words to say. I won't take up too much time. But first of all, I live in an apartment complex that was built by Dave Gillis. I've been there for 2 years now since it was finished, and I just give much thanks and gratitude to him for constructing this beautiful and safe apartment in which I am living. 2 years ago, in January 2021, my daughter, her husband, and myself sold a house we owned on Beatty Line in Fergus. At that time, we were all looking for our own accommodation to rent. Stepping out into the rental market, we were shocked at how few options there were, and the competition to get into a rental unit. It was soon very evident to us that our choices were limited. I was lucky in that the 9-unit rental apartment that Dave Gillis was building at the time had 1 unit available. This apartment was free only because the individual who was planning to occupy it had to find something earlier than the completion date. Yes, I was lucky on 2 counts. I live in a great apartment and have a landlord who is caring and responsible, always responding quickly to any situation, no matter how big or small. My daughter and son-in-law and my 4-year-old granddaughter were not so lucky. They both have long-standing jobs and good references. A month before the closing date of the sale of our house, they took the only apartment available to them. In an older building, it came with its own issues. Bathroom mold, in spite of the frequent washing of walls and ceiling, would quickly reappear, in spite of the ventilation fan. When turned on, it brought in more heaving dust bunnies than the moisture it was to take out. The bathtub had been resurfaced twice, but quickly peels off into the tub, often floating in the water, filling that tub. This is not something they want to bath their daughter in. Although it can't be proven this building was the cause, she did develop constant respiratory problems after moving there. There's a need, a great need, for rental apartments that provide a healthy, safe environment. If I had not found the comfortable and safe unit very fitting to my already lived 80 years, I may have had to move from the area, from my family, whom support me as I support them. The 5-story apartment complex that has been proposed for 223 St. Andrew will add much ambiance to that section of St. Andrew Street with its attractive and inviting design. I walk on that street often and look forward to a neighborhood growth where we can meet and greet and live in harmony with one another. That's what I haven't heard here. Fear not change. To live in what was, although still honoring the past, but allowing that to prohibit a wonderful future for many is to deny a moral and ethical builder permission to fill this need. I ask you, would you think differently if you were wearing the shoes of those seeking a rental apartment? This, like you, will become their home in which they welcome family and friends. I walk up one flight of stairs now. I consider it good exercise. Perhaps in future years, I may need an elevator. That isn't provided in many areas within Fergus. I thank you for listening to my words. I, Rosalind Sutherland, am a happy renter. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next delegation, Ian McCrae. Thank you.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor Jefferson, Mayor Waters, Council, and staff. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. I'm going to dedicate this to the number of long-term residents who were forced to leave our community due to displacement of their long-term rentals by short-term rentals, people I could not help when I was councillor. Though I may seem to digress from discussing 223 St. Andrew Street East, it is to provide context to the community's discussion. Last month, the township posted a website notice for applications for its new Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee. Earlier this week, Council was advised of 3 challenges facing our community related to housing. They were designing a healthy community, I quote, where people of all ages and abilities can live, work, play, connect, and access amenities. The study focused on the link between the built environment and population health and the advantages of denser neighborhoods and intensification. Second, removing disability-related barriers in Wellington County and its 7 municipalities' buildings. And third, the impact of an attainable rental housing shortage on the local hospital's challenges to attract nurses, primary care, emergency department physicians, hospitalists, and general surgeons. These 4 seemingly unrelated but interconnected events remind us that when addressing our housing issue, we must holistically consider all factors, not just heritage, traffic, and parking, as primarily discussed last week and what I'm hearing tonight. Nature requires balance to keep everything equal and in sync. Moving one piece, like a mobile, disrupts all others. Unfortunately, because we do not consider the interconnectedness of things, humans are very good at disrupting and upsetting the balance. In his drive to increase housing, Rob Ford is an excellent example, ignoring his impact on municipal planning, farmland, greenbelt lands, and wetlands associated with groundwater replenishment. His efforts are not helping to save our water. I'll talk about my recent visit to my daughter's Ottawa apartment, walking around her neighborhood, and reflecting on what I read and heard at the council meeting on Monday and the planning meeting last week. My daughter's apartment is within walking distance of many of the same amenities as Fergus. We park the car and walk everywhere when we stay with her frequently. Across the street is a well-established single-family home subdivision. Although it was a work day, the apartment's parking lot was half full. Perhaps this is because some tenants, like my daughter, worked from home or shifts. Working from home has become a popular post-COVID practice for reducing car use, saving money, and contributing to environmental sustainability. Others I saw rode bicycles, walked, or took the bus. After work, several residents walked to nearby stores, combining physical activity with retrieving meals and other items. The presence of so many parked cars mid-morning contrasted with views shared last week of apartment parking lots emptying all their cars onto the streets and creating havoc. Seeing this, I was reminded of an event I witnessed in Elora. I saw a healthy person I knew park, enter the TD Bank, return, and drive to the post office to pick up mail. The person then drove back to the Geddes Street Market before perhaps returning home or visiting the gym. Comparing this lifestyle approach to the described apartment activities, which is healthier, more cost-effective, and more environmentally friendly? Electric wheelchairs were common at my daughter's apartment. Elevators in proximity to services allowed these tenants to access downtown without a car, wheel-trans, or handicapped parking spot. This freedom allowed spontaneous outdoor exploration. Several were walking their dogs and talking to neighbors. I saw the township's vision of a healthy community that saves money, promotes healthy habits, and improves residents' social well-being. Why would our community reject this vision? Proclamations of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our community are merely words. The practice, not the conversation, reveals a community's true focus. Thus, I question public opposition to fully accessible downtown apartment buildings that allow equal access to and enjoyment of our downtowns. The building code requires elevators in all apartment buildings above 3 stories. Why deny people of all ages and abilities the freedom and convenience of downtown living? I heard last week that we should preserve our downtowns for our tourists. I heard that again tonight. Should our residents' needs come first? 223 St. Andrew Street East is within a mobility accessible distance of shops, a laundromat, food retail, restaurants, cafes, legal and medical offices, a post office, banks, churches, a school, a library, and a theater, limiting the need for a vehicle and its associated emissions and costs. Overall, the building's design and location are sympathetic to its surroundings in trying to blend in and serve the community's housing needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Okay. Alrighty, so that's our registered delegations for this evening. I'm going to put a call out to the room if there's anybody else that would like to speak to this. Yes? You can come forward. Can I just...
There. Okay, thank you.
Can I get you to say your name for the
Yes,
record?
I'm going to do that. My name is Karen Barker, and I live at 210 St. Andrew Street East, directly south of the proposed building. I did submit a letter September 15th of last year. I didn't hear that it was received. So I sent it again on February 3rd. I still didn't hear that it was received. So I guess you guys didn't get it. But anyway, I won't read it. I'll just tell you my highlights that I'm sort of concerned with. I did review all the reports that were submitted for this proposal, and one of them was the shadow analysis. I noted that it was the architect itself that did this study, and I just wanted to my concern was there an independent study completed for the shadow effect, not by the architect themselves that have an interest. That's one point. The other thing was sewage. Maybe I don't understand sewage, but with my property, I have a sewage pump because the sewage has to be pumped up to the St. Andrew Street, and on 2020, my sewage pump broke, and I had my plumber come in, and he said that my sewage pump just wasn't strong enough. So he put in the strongest sewage pump he could. And I said to him, so that should be okay then, right? And then he said, oh yeah, as long as there's not an apartment building that goes across the street. And we laughed. Yeah, so now my concern is that there might be around 19 toilets and sinks also flushing. So I just want to make sure that if someone could speak on that, is what do you do with all that extra sewage and gray water coming towards me? So there's that. Also, I noted in the introduction to the MHBC planning report, it said that they were doing an assessment based on a 4-story building. So was that a typo? I don't know. But if that whole assessment was done on a 4-story, well, I don't know if that even applies now. So I'm not sure. I'd like that clarified, whether they did an assessment on a 4-story or a 5-story building, but maybe it was a typo. The other thing I'd like to ask about is the Heritage Society that did the consultation that, I mean, they said that my house, 210, was supports the historical character of the town of Fergus, and it won't have any impact on my house. But the Heritage Society of Centre Wellington actually wasn't even consulted. It seemed to be the Heritage Society from Kitchener. So I just wanted to know if our local Heritage Society was actually consulted on all of this. It was the first thing I heard tonight was that the parking spaces increased from 12 to 23. In the original report that I read, it said 17 units and 12 spaces. So now there's 23. So I guess that's changed. And again, it was also noted about disability parking. That wasn't really mentioned as well, as how much and if that's going to be enough parking. But I'm not going to talk about parking. We've done parking enough. But with my, I have a clinic out of my house, and I have a parking little lot for my clinic, and I had to pay for a parking variant, even though I see one client per hour. But I guess the 3 parking spots that I had wasn't enough, so now I have 8. Hopefully nobody parks in my lot from the thing. So, but I am not against an apartment building. Don't get me wrong here. That's not what I'm proposing here. So I just want to make sure that the other thing is, it mentioned about, quote, in support of the application of the 50% reduction additional, the TDM measures are proposed that will alleviate the parking demands of the proposed redevelopment. I'm not sure what that means, alleviate. The overall objectives of TDM, which stands for the Transportation Demand Management strategies, are to support and enhance sustainable transportation choices and discourage single occupant vehicle trips, and to reduce traffic congestion, parking supply needs, and demand for parking spaces by encouraging various modes of travel. Well, we don't have public transportation, and I'm glad that they are going to supply bike racks, but biking up to Zares or Freshco in the winter is not going to be very pleasant, especially bad weather. So it's just not realistic, some of the things in the report. The other thing was, if there are going to be bikes that's going to be used, we need bike lanes going to each grocery store. But that's another thing. The other thing was, my foundation of my house, because it was built in 1903, is of just limestone. I don't have concrete blocks. It's just limestone. And my concern is when they start to drill, currently I've been in Fergus for 37 years, and I haven't had a leak at all in my basement, especially in the spring. Thank goodness I don't have I don't have a sub pump. My concern is with the drilling of when they're starting to build, if it shakes or stirs my foundation and I start getting a leak every spring, who's responsible? Who do I go to? Do I go to the township for allowing this building, or do I go to the builders? And what if the leak starts a year later, 2 years later, 3 years? I want to know who's accountable for that. Or my windows, the windows can get a little shifted, and I have all casement windows, and they may not open or close properly later as well. So I'm just curious, who would I go to for that? Right now, our traffic on the corner of Gowrie and St. Andrew, when you're coming up Gowrie, when you're south on Gowrie, to turn west onto St. Andrew. It's near impossible to turn west. Most people turn east and then go around the block, because with all the cars that are parked there, you cannot see. And so I have to do that on a daily basis, where I try to turn left, and it's almost impossible. Now I'm wondering, with this apartment building with 17 units plus commercial, there'll be more cars trying to turn left and right at that corner, which does not have a four-stop sign. So I was hoping there would be a four-way stop signs, and I'd like council to address that, as well as how are they going to deal with the increase in transportation and traffic and stop signs, and the 50 kilometers an hour down to 40, hopefully, like the rest of the town. Because my daughter was struck by a car too on that thing. So anyway, broken pelvis, it's okay, it doesn't matter, but it was a lot of traffic there. So, and it still is, and it's going to get worse. So that's all I have to do. That's all I have to say, sorry, is just those things I just want clarified on some of the conflicts of interest in that. And that's it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Now, can I make another call out for anybody that would like to speak? Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Susan Radojevic, and I am a new, hopefully, resident of this area. So I don't know much about this gentleman who's going to be offering to build this building. I don't know much about the planning or anything like that, because I've just been here for 6 months. But I do have a perspective from looking for rental space. And I'd like to applaud that lady there, the 80-year-old who is a proud renter. I have been looking for a place for 6 months. I am a person of means. I can't afford it. But I don't think I should be paying $3,600 for the first floor of a townhouse. So housing is very, very complicated issue, and it has so many variables. I don't know your jobs. I applaud your jobs. I would never be able to be one of you, but thank you for that. But it's a very complicated issue. It's got to do with parking. It has to do with environment. It has to do with the different ways that we use housing nowadays. And as some of as the proposed application of the $2 million a house, half an acre, was approved, that was out of your hands. It was not your responsibility, because the province made that. So I feel for you. I really do feel for you. It's not an easy problem to solve, but it is solvable. And again, I applaud the lady who said that we should not be afraid of change and development. It's about progress, and it's about positive living in a smaller town. I lived in Toronto for most of my life, and I decided to move to a little bit outside. I got tired of the city. So we should really applaud people that bring an application that will address someone's needs, like mine, 6 months, and I think I'm going to be knocking on Mayor Waters' door and asking him if I can get a permit and pitch a tent in Bissell Park, because it is an issue here, and it impacts not just people looking for a place, but it impacts local businesses, it impacts so many other things, and not just, and with all due respect to the parking issue, I get it, I have a car, I need parking too, but it's bigger than that. And so I think that we really need to look at this in a little bit more of a broader perspective of what it's going to do to the community, and also connect more of the dots that are not always visible to us when we look at an application. And anything that comes in, when you started at one place, and with so many variables happening all the time, it always ends up being something else. And more often than not, in my line of work, it ends up being better than it was when you first started. So I just wanted to offer a perspective from someone that is looking for a place to live. And if anybody knows anywhere, please let me know. and just to applaud all of you for taking on this issue and for people that are willing to build different kinds of housing availability, because housing has changed. It's remote work, it's a vacation place. It's very different. It's not just buying a place or renting a place, as we know we have done for so many years. It's a different way of looking at housing. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I see there's another gentleman, so if you want to say if there's anybody downstairs who'd like to speak, please come up.
Okay.
And while he's speaking, they could make their way, but I've asked twice and there's no one there.
My name is Keith Bennett, and I've been a resident of Fergus for a number of years. I rent. Between my wife and I, we live in a two-bedroom house, which we can afford at this point in time. I have retired. My wife will be retiring shortly. We will no longer be able to own or rent that house. It's just beyond our means. We are looking for apartments in this area. We want to live in Fergus. I have 2 daughters in Fergus. I have 3 grandchildren in Fergus. So we are looking somewhere in Fergus. I do not want to live in someone's basement. I don't want to live in someone's attic. I want to live in an apartment building. The apartment building that has been proposed would suit my needs. If you take a look at other towns, other cities, you will see progress, unfortunately, some not as nice as others. You take a look at the city of Guelph, who at that point used to say we cannot build anything higher than the Church of Our Lady, which was 13 or 12 stories. They're currently now up to 23 stories, and that was because of the OMB, which does have a ruling, obviously, of some sort. We take a look at the city of Brantford, who let their downtown go. Nobody was going into the downtown. They've torn down a lot of it and rebuilt it with apartments to try to vitalize that area. I think we have to be very careful with the downtown of Fergus. Certainly you want to keep the heritage, and the heritage to me is Tower Street East. Tower Street West, I can only see one heritage building, which is the Bredoalbin Inn. So if we can use some way of infilling some of these areas, I think that's the key. We have to infill. We do not want Fergus to sprawl, as we are seeing right now. There's a lot of sprawl going on, and we need to be able to, as I say, use that infill to have people come downtown. If you don't have people downtown, people don't come downtown. As I said, Brantford's a good example. You have things downtown. You have a grocery store per se in the old Fergus Market, and there's other things there too. You know, you've got the tennis courts, you've got the curling clubs, you've got churches, you've got banks. And there's other things that maybe would come in if there were people that would use the downtown. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to take a look at how do we make our downtown survive. And one of the ways is doing that is by having housing people into the downtown area. And, we talk about parking. Unfortunately, with people now, everybody wants a car. So you get one person driving all the time. And how do you get around that? I'm not sure. But if your driveways are blocked or whatever, that's what the OPP are around for too. So rather than complain, call the OPP. Other than that, there's, again, if I cannot find something in the Fergus area, unfortunately, I have been looking at other areas. I do not want to get away from my daughters or my grandchildren, but for me and for us, my wife and I, because she has had cancer, she needs to be close by a cancer area. The next place we look at is Woodstock. So you'll be losing a potential tenant, unfortunately, or a resident of this facility because of that. We've got some good places, we've got good areas here, we've got good parks, we've got a new hospital. These are the things I think we can celebrate, and certainly by including some new residents. And I don't think this resident is beyond what we should be looking at anyway. 5 stories, yes, it's bigger than what we would like downtown, but we need people downtown, and that's the whole thing, you know. And I would think that these gentlemen here, from what I've seen and heard, they seem to be looking at the whole picture, and I commend them for trying to build something that would fit in to the downtown area. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Frank Tassoni. I'm here tonight to voice my opinion on 223 St. Andrew Street in Fergus. I have 2 children, Jacob and Zachary, ages 25 and 22. They recently started their careers in business marketing and HVAC trades. The reason I mention this is I'm very concerned for not only them, but all young people, middle-aged people, seniors that are looking for affordable housing. I can tell you that Jacob and Zachary will not be in the market to purchase a single-family home, not today, not next year, probably not for the next 5 or 6 years. So where do they live? If somebody has a basement apartment that's probably non-legal, then please let me know that's affordable for my kids. There's a shortage of affordable housing in Center Wellington, and it'll only get worse. That's inevitable if this development is not supported. Reasons for supporting this development are quite obvious. More money spent in local community. A vibrant downtown equals healthy economy. This development would support local jobs as well as a stream of tax revenue for the Center Wellington. Would also create better investment opportunities, as this gentleman stated. Bring people downtown, you bring investment or investors, potential investors, and you would, and therefore would bring amenities downtown. So you bring a vibrant aspect to the community. No affordable housing equals a stagnant community. So I say this again, please help support 223 St. Andrew Street development and make Center Wellington a great place to live. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to this? Oh, yep.
Good evening, Council. My name is Tim McDonald. I'm a longtime Center Wellington resident. I am completely aware that we do need more housing. I'm opposed to this proposal for 3 reasons. 1, I'm not really sure the building suits Fergus. 2, we've covered the parking in a great deal of detail. But the third is the other residents. I've been lucky enough over the years that I've had a couple of afternoons in the backyard of the property directly next to this proposal. And I've got to tell you, I just cannot imagine what a 5-story building is going to do to them or to that property, to their property value. How is that fair to them? They bought those properties years ago without ever thinking that something like this would happen. 3 stories, I suspect, is going to be difficult enough for them, but 5 stories, wow, that really kind of wipes out your home, doesn't it? Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. I just wanted you to think about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to do a final call for anybody that wants to be a delegation to speak to this.
Am I allowed to add something?
I will let you.
We've had a lot of really positive speakers that are for this bill, and I'm still stating that I'm against it. But it's not that we're against it. None of the people in here that are opposed to this bill are against it. They're just against 5 stories, and I want to make it very clear. Like, we want this town to grow. We want Fergus to be awesome and continue to be awesome, but 3 stories is plenty, and that alone is going to cause some ramifications. So please, 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 just consider a 3-story build is plenty and perfectly suited for downtown Fergus. Thank you.
Thanks. Alrighty, if there's, oh, is there? Oh, thanks.
My name is Richard Boy. I'm a resident of First Line. I'm a resident of St. Wellington. I live on First Line. I used to play hockey with His Worship, and never during the hockey game did I ever thought I would address him as His Worship. I had some choice names for you when you missed my pass, but anyways, sooner or later, you're gonna have to go 5 stories or higher in Fergus. And I'm not saying it's gotta be this one, but sooner or later, you're gonna have to do it, right? We have a councillor that's not here who doesn't wanna turn farmland into, residential subdivisions. Then you're gonna have to go up, and sooner or later, you're gonna have to bite the bullet. Parking is an issue, obviously, but sooner or later, you're gonna have to do it. My question to you, His Worship, Your Worship, is how much control do you actually have over this with Doug Ford ramming everything down our throat? Certainly the meeting that we attended earlier about the golf course, nobody in this room can stop that thing. It's gonna happen. Doug Ford opened the door wide open. People need to realize that, whether you're for, whether you're against, right? The only way you can stop that is vote Ted Arnott out of office, and that's not gonna happen in this writing. So I would just tell us, how much control do you actually have over this? But thank you, and I think to see a united council this time around has been like amazing. Instead of reading the Wellington Advertiser and say 3 to 4, right? It's unanimous. So whatever you do, keep on doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so final call, anybody? No? Okay. Now I'm going to turn it back over. Pierre would like to do any responses to the comments or questions that were raised. Is it okay if we do a quick little break, bio break for a minute? Is that okay? Okay, thanks. We're gonna just recess for like a minute or 2. Alrighty, if we may, we're going to come out of recess and come back to order. Excuse me. Hi, thanks. If you do want to carry on conversations, there is the hallway outside if that's okay. Thank you. Now we're going to turn it over. Pierre, if you'd like to do responses.
Yes, and again, thank you for all the comments and the public who have come out, and it's always great to hear the comments. And just in response to the parking, everybody, there's a lot of discussion about the parking, and I'll take some responsibility to that there's been some changes, and that's really part of this public meeting is to announce some of those changes, but certainly from the time that we have applied to now, we've made some changes knowing that the parking was a concern. So first and foremost, we made some design changes on the site to now provide for, to be clear, and everybody can write these numbers down, there are 14 spaces on site. And with an additional 9 spaces that Dave has off-site, which is permitted by the bylaw through an off-site parking agreement, we have a total of 23 spaces for 17 units and 2 commercial. So that's 23 spaces for 17 residential units and 2 commercial. So that's 6 more spaces than the residential units provide.
Excuse me, can I just ask for quiet in the chambers? Thank you.
So just hopefully that clarifies that, but by all means, we have provided that to township staff, and again, they'll be reviewing that with this application as we move through this process. The barrier-free, again, if it's 2 spaces required, then we will provide 2, not a problem. I want to thank Karen. Her comments are very clear and articulate, and I just want to try to respond to all of them. Was an independent review of the shadow study done? Well, my comment to that is that these shadow studies are pretty common. It's a model that is done. Any architect or design firm would be able to do them. It hasn't been requested, but it certainly, like I said earlier, the heritage impact assessment is being reviewed by a peer reviewer. The shadow study was included as part of that heritage impact assessment, so I would expect the peer reviewers will be reviewing that as well as part of their overall assessment. Sewage capacity, we've prepared a functional servicing report by MTE, our engineering consultants. They have not identified any sewage issues, and this has been reviewed by the township's engineering staff, and they have concurred at this point. An assessment of 4 stories, or whether it's a typo in the building or in the report, that's something we'll go back and confirm. Sounds like a typo, and our apologies if that is. Whether this has been reviewed by your local heritage committee, I think I will turn that perhaps question to Mariana. At this point in time, I'm not aware of whether it has been or not. The TDM measures are not realistic. TDM measures are pretty commonplace nowadays in terms of a form of helping reduce the use of the automobile and encouraging more sustainable forms of transportation. And it's not just bicycle storage, it includes other things in terms of the design of the building, providing direct connections to sidewalks, providing unbundled parking. That means charging for your parking, which is what we will be doing. So again, if you want to rent here, you'll be charged an extra cost for renting the spaces. In other municipalities where there's things like this, there's car share programs, those things. So maybe over the course of time, that'll come to Fergus or Laura. Fingers crossed. Concern with vibration and the impacts of vibration. You'll recall one of my slides, that was one of the recommendations from the Heritage Impact Assessment, that we would do that. And that's pretty common in the industry as well, as doing a pre-inspection of surrounding homes. It only protects the surrounding homeowners, but also the developer, to confirm whether in fact the construction is causing the damage. So that is an absolute yes to that particular. And if there is if it's found that there is damage caused by the construction, then the developer would be responsible to help repair that. So those are, I think those are the direct questions, and hopefully that addresses some of the outstanding issues. Thank you.
Mariana?
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor Jefferson. I can confirm that the Heritage Committee is reviewing the heritage impact assessments on the 3 recent developments, and it will be they will be placed in front of the Heritage Committee at an upcoming meeting.
Thank you. Okay, so now moving on, we're going to do questions from council. So would you like to start, Councillor McDonald?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Jefferson. Thank you to everyone that came tonight. It's good to hear from everyone. This is to you, sir. I was a little proactive and went out to the site. And so what's there right now? Are those 2 container homes that were fit together, like actual containers? Because that's kind of what it looks like. And will that, so you're going to tear that down for this? And are they being used right now, or are they able to be used right now?
So they're not container buildings. One is a shed, a storage shed, and the other is what could be a rental unit, but it's not a container home. And I'm being told by Dave that it's not being rented out at this point.
Fair enough. I do recognize, you know, some of the changes that you've made. And this would probably be more of a comment, you know, I have farmers that grow our food that don't want houses on their farms, and we have our downtowns that do not want us to go up. But I know for a fact that in order for a developer to keep the rates down, they have to go up in order to secure an amount of funds to keep those rates down. I know over 3 stories, we don't have to provide an elevator because that's the law. Why wouldn't someone want to provide an elevator? We're wanting more accessible units. So I just want to recognize also that you, yourself, Pierre, and Freyet Turner, and the developer all live and work here. And we're using our own local vendors for this, and I want to recognize that. I do have a seniors list of people that have reached out to me that want rental apartments. They're desperate for them. They don't want to be told that they have to bike. I have to say that, and they do want parking spots. So that is definitely something I will be paying attention to, knowing now that it's going in front of the Heritage Committee. I'm glad to hear that. I'm looking forward to that result. I definitely want the sewage situation looked into. As someone who looks at infrastructure, you know, just attending good roads and seeing what other places are doing, that is definitely a concern. We don't want to be a headache for the properties that are surrounding, because that's kind of gross to deal with. So thank you.
Questions, Mayor Waters?
Maybe just more of a comment. I'd like to thank the community for coming out and talking about. These are really tough issues to talk about, and it's not just our community it's facing this, it's everywhere in Ontario. We're seeing it. It's a difficult time, and these are very challenging times for communities. There is a need for all types of housing in our community, you know, it's always difficult when somebody's sold their house or their single family, and I've seen it for at least 20 years anyways in this community, that they have no place to go, you know, and I don't think that's something that I don't think we really want our community. We want our people to live in the community, grow up here, and be able to stay here and with their friends and families. So we need to find a variety of solutions in terms of our housing needs. That also includes sort of variety of pricing as well, and so this is not an easy thing. And also preserve our agricultural land, which we're going to all need. You know, see, these are very difficult times. So this council will be challenged with not only this application, but future applications as well, to deal with these things. So we take your comments very seriously. Staff takes your comments very seriously. And we will look at this in a very fair and open-minded way, and our conclusions you may not be happy with what happens with the conclusion, whether you're be on one side or the other. It's just the reality of where we're at right now. But housing is a human right, and we need to be able to provide a variety of housing for our community. And if we want a healthy community, we need to be able to provide that. Anyways, thank you again. Your comments were very heartfelt. We take them very seriously. We appreciate your time and putting your arguments together. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Waters. Questions, Councillor Eboy?
Thank you so much through you, Deputy Mayor Jefferson. I wholeheartedly agree with Mayor Waters. These are very difficult decisions, and most of us know you. Those of you sitting in the gallery, we know you. We're friends with you. We've visited your homes and your businesses, and it's not an easy decision. I want to read what I wrote so I don't mix it up. We are trying very hard to honor our agricultural lands and our heritage properties, and I'm personally looking for collaborative solutions. How are we going to continue to meet the needs of this growing community and still support the needs of people that are already here? So in the nature of looking at collaborative solutions in these very challenging situations, is there any option for things like one of the things I did hear over and over again was who is going to be responsible for monitoring said parking lots until or if we grow our parking strategy, which not if, when we grow our parking strategy, which will absolutely include some exciting options. At this time, are you willing to work with these landlords to say, hey, we're going to help you to monitor these? There's going to be a cost involved. Is this something in an attempt to bridge this broken relationship before it breaks? Is there an opportunity for you guys to work together in that fashion? And I have one follow-up question.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll try to answer this. Well, first and foremost, it's rental, and Mr. Gillies will be the landlord and will be the one sort of supervising that. And if there are any issues or complaints with respect to parking even on-site or off-site, then it would ideally go through him, and he's the person to manage that. And that's really how the buck stops with him, really.
Okay, and follow-up, when, Mariana, when can we expect, hopefully, can we expect that heritage assessment? Please.
Through you, I believe it will be placed on the next Heritage Committee meeting agenda. Well, that would be just the Heritage Committee's comments. I don't know when it will be coming back to Council at this time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Adams, questions?
Yes, through you, Chair. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. I thought it was great to see the support from even within the gallery there. Just for those that are in support in opposition of this current proposal. I do kind of echo Councillor McDonald's comments about, we build 3 stories, we're going to lose those elevators. I have a couple questions, but my one question is, if we go to 4 stories, does this build still happen?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think I explained a bit at the last meeting in terms of the economics of this, and it's challenging to answer that question right off the bat. But I can tell you, Mr. Gillies has existing rental units that are about 9 units, and in this world of interest rates and costs and supply chain issues, he's just breaking even with 9 units. You then add in the cost of building an elevator, which is extremely expensive. You really need to try to subsidize that by providing more units, and really that's what we're doing is, in order to provide a number of units that are within market range and within reason, and also making You know, let's be honest, he's a business person. He's not in this for a charity. He wants to definitely go beyond break even. It really has to go this number of units.
Thank you. Adding on to that, we need housing types of all types for all abilities. And when you had talked about like the buildings would be accessible and having that elevator, can you confirm, like, would there be actually like apartments that would be like wheelchair accessible, like kind of AODA compliant? Because we also know that that's a need in the community.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, great question. There is a minimum requirement under the building code to provide a certain number. We'll certainly be providing that. I don't have that number off the top of my head, and those will be have to be designed with just basically wider doorways in the entry and in the bathroom. Dave probably even knows more than I do about the building code, but there is a requirement in the building code to do that.
Sure.
I have a lot, but I'll just narrow it back down to one question. I thought a fellow councillor asked a great question tonight in the first meeting about how, and you, this is not your first development in town, and I'm just kind of curious on any recent, that we talked about giving back to the community. And for me, I see, you know what, I'm going to keep that aside. My question is, has there been, like, are you able to describe any recent ways you've given back to the community, or in future ways? You're not building $2 million homes, I understand that, but just kind of a little bit of background about the buildings.
On the Moore Street property that I'm doing, I am helping to contribute to the roads and the sidewalks that are going in there. So I guess in a sense, yes, I am.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Craddock?
I have no questions.
Thank you. Any other questions develop out of that discussion? Nothing? Councillor Adams?
Sorry, I did have one more question. There was a lot of talk, design can be, you know, preference for design could be very different to one another. I'm just kind of curious if there was like a kind of like a, what was your inspiration for the current design, and whether it was taken from something specific in town, or whether the design is open at this point.
Yeah, Nicola's saying she doesn't want to be put on the spot, but she's the architect here. So again, the building materials, we're looking at trying to get the inspiration from the surrounding area, colors, the form of materials. It's not going to be stucco. It's not going to be siding, even though there is siding in the community. We're trying to provide something that is sensitive to the area and in keeping with what's surrounding us.
Councillor Eboy?
Thank you for indulging me, Madam Deputy Chair. Actually, one more question about design, if I may. So I looked at it and I thought it would be more pleasing if it didn't have such a box look. Like right behind you, there's an old heritage farm or barn. If you could even make not real fronts so that we don't have that box look. I think for me, it really struck me as much more harsh than I thought it would the minute I saw the first, not the below it, it was the rooftop that looked really, that was a real thing for me, honestly. So if it could have a little more, and again, I know it's not our place to do your design work, but just something that didn't look quite so stark, like a box.
I think that part of that design was trying to be sensitive to the height issue. So that's how we, like, if we had to put a roof on it, it would have looked really big. And that's why we did it like that.
Well, you know that middle piece, through you, Madam Chair, if I may, you know that middle piece, which is, I'm guessing, the elevator?
Okay.
Like, it wouldn't be any higher than that, just to,
Yeah. And you know,
again, not my place,
just so everyone here, we're at the very early stages of designing this, so there's more work that we have to do on this.
Great, I look forward to seeing some future renditions.
Thank you.
And if I may just add, I'm sure staff will have their own comments and critiques of our design, so we'll be going through that process through site plan as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. I want to thank everybody for attending and for participating in our public meeting this evening. And I'm going to advise that council will be considering the bylaw at a future council meeting, and that completes our agenda for this evening, and I'm going to declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you.